Chapter 501. Among Monsters 1. Time to act. Time to fulfill the commandments. The Ultras, the Royal Family, and the Starlight Family. These were the three powers chosen by the Lord of Light to be erased from existence. The Church hadn't chosen just one of them, it had chosen them all. By the end of this war, the enemies of the Lord of Light shall vanish from this world. The Church's followers did not know why their so-called God had named those three factions in particular. The Ultras were understandable. They were demon worshippers, their very antithesis. But the Royal Family and the Starlights were something else entirely. The situation was shrouded in mystery, but who were they to question the will of the God they had sworn to follow? He gave the order, and they would obey. For the first time in 300 years, the Church was preparing to unleash its full might against all of its enemies, and the chaos the world would witness would be of a scale never seen before. The other side of the world, the continent of the Ultras. Day 1 of the war had finally resumed. On the side of humanity, forces were divided into numerous units, all sent as forward vanguards. The main army followed from behind. The Ultras, too, deployed many of their own, both of the lower and higher bloodlines and even nightmare creatures. As a result, dozens of battles erupted simultaneously, with soldiers and monsters clashing across countless fronts. The situation grew so complex that reports began pouring into the Central Command in a steady stream. In just a few hours, 21 full-scale skirmishes had erupted along the front lines. Scattered battles, each with different outcomes. The vanguards were merely probing forces, sent to assess the enemy's strength and tactics. The deeper they could go, the better. But in many cases, those forces would retreat the moment they encountered a true threat. Among those 21 engagements, the Empire won some, lost others, and withdrew from a few. The squads had limited manpower, so venturing too far into enemy territory with such small numbers was sheer madness. Among the commanders deployed by the Empire, many performed remarkably well, especially those under Phoenix Sunlight and the hero Snow Lionheart. They did their jobs to perfection, facing the enemy, securing victories, and clearing the path for the main force, which remained intact and ready for the true clash. But among the 21 squads, there was one unit that left the old man Iris Sunlight sitting in stunned silence at the command center. Fury marked his face, and his fiery beard flared more intensely than ever before. The people around him were anxious, while the reports continued to arrive one after another. "Sir, they are still sending us regular reports and updates, but they're ignoring all orders. Also, their leader is threatening to stop communicating altogether if we keep nagging him." As soon as he heard the latest report, Iris Sunlight shot up from his seat, slamming his desk into splinters. "What the hell are those fools thinking? Do they think this is a game?" He was truly furious this time. Iris had never been fond of chaos and deviation on the battlefield, especially when it came from their own side. That damn bastard, Fry Starlight. Naturally, the subject was none other than Fry Starlight and his band of lunatics, the elite unit that had ventured so deep into enemy territory that they were now completely unreachable. He was given 1,000 men, yet hundreds returned, fleeing in terror after spending just one day fighting by his side. Fry wasn't stupid. Of that, Iris was certain. He wasn't the reckless type who would throw himself into death blindly. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't possibly survive alone in enemy territory. Even a fool would understand that. "He knows what he's doing is irrational," Iris muttered, as his fiery beard blazed even more furiously. "Then why the hell is he still going deeper into enemy lands?" He roared once more, the floor trembling beneath his feet. Fry Starlight had become a force beyond control, unpredictable and wild. He ignored all orders and acted completely on his own. His actions were on the verge of ruining the Empire's strategy entirely, which left Iris with only one option: to pretend he didn't exist. "We'll stick to the original plan." As for Fry and those who followed him, they would bear the consequences of their choices. That was the conclusion Iris reached after enduring Frey's madness for several days. Empire Vanguard, Fry Starlight's unit. The unit that went further than anyone else. The team of lunatics that pierced deep into enemy territory, now completely surrounded by ultras from all sides. For the 8th day in a row, they were still fighting. The magic cannons hadn't stopped firing, and most soldiers had long since run out of strength and stamina. But a particular group of fighters kept pushing forward, just as ferocious, if not more so than before. An old witch rained down lightning without pause. A terrifying assassin slipped through shadows, ending lives silently. A demonic princess veiled the battlefield in her shadows, and many others. But the most terrifying of them all, without a doubt, was the man who led them. The man soaked head to toe in blood. So much blood that he looked monstrous, except none of it was his. It was all from his enemies. The exhausted soldiers watching from afar saw that the battle still raged on. At the forefront, a specific man charged madly, swinging his massive sword. Each strike turned dozens of enemies into mangled remains, while a crazed grin stretched across his blood-covered face. Morval cried out in sheer exhilaration. "Ah! You're insane, Lord Starlight." Panting heavily, Morval kept running, struggling to keep up with that cursed man's back. In Morval's sharp eyes, only two colors remained: the glowing violet aura of Fry Starlight and the crimson blood pouring from his victims. He could never understand how that young man could handle such a terrifying number of enemies with such ease. "Just how many have you killed by now, damn it?" Slash! Even as he shouted, his voice was drowned by the thunderous blasts and destruction caused by Frey's blade. That blade, soaked in blood, moved with terrifying precision, while a deranged smile stretched across Frey's face. He kept slashing, decapitating his foes with random, brutal swings that left most of their corpses too mutilated to identify. In many cases, his deadliest strikes didn't even leave a corpse behind. Fry turned to Morval, who had been chasing after him. "Pardon me, I didn't quite catch that." His hand moved again on its own, slaughtering more and more, staining the battlefield red. "Would you mind repeating it?" Chapter 502. Among Monsters, 2. He asked with a soft smile, one that did not match at all with his blood-drenched face. "And no, never mind. Things are just fine this way." With another sweep of his massive sword, Morval sent more ultras flying through the air. "But I do wonder, Lord Starlight, is it really wise to keep advancing blindly like this?" Morval had been fighting beside Fry the entire time, and he could barely keep up with Frey's insane momentum. Most of the enemies they encountered seemed weak, whether they were of the higher or lower bloodline. "What's wrong? Hitting your limit already, Morval? Didn't you say you were born for moments like these?" Frey's words felt darkly ominous, especially as he casually sliced an enemy clean in half mid-sentence. "Thinking of running away too?" "Not at all," Morval replied with a sadistic grin, his thirst for blood on full display. "What I'm saying is, I fear the Ultras might send their main forces soon if we keep advancing like this. They had gone too deep, far deeper than they should have." "I wouldn't be surprised if one of their commanders showed up," Morval said, to which Fry Starlight calmly responded, "That's exactly what I'm betting on." Putting an end to the spectacle, Fry unleashed a terrifying wave of dark aura that swallowed the remaining enemy troops. A sweeping blast tore through everything in front of him, ending the battle in one brutal stroke. In this era, it's individual strength that determines the outcome of wars. The strong, the monsters that lead from above. That's what truly matters. Ordinary soldiers could fight all day if they wanted, but in the end, a single overwhelmingly powerful enemy could show up and wipe them out in an instant. "That's why I'm here, to deal with enemies like that," Fry said, wiping the blood from his face. This was their 6th victory in just 8 days. A terrifying number, to say the least. Fry had shouldered most of the battles alone so far, allowing the other soldiers to conserve their strength and stamina. That was how they had managed to endure up until now. As Fry and Morval spoke, A pure green light enveloped their bodies, a healing glow that washed away fatigue, injuries, and exhaustion. When they turned around, they saw that Uriel had already activated her divine power, letting out a breath of relief alongside the others. She had stayed at the rear with Celine, but since they had followed Fry, even positioning themselves behind the main fighters hadn't spared them from ending up amidst the enemy. Thank you, Saintess Uriel. Your presence truly is a blessing. Beside Uriel and Celine, the witch Zenith appeared with her usual crooked smile. She looked nothing like the terrifying sorceress who had just bombarded the battlefield with lightning moments ago. Uriel didn't respond, still focused on healing the wounded. But Zenith didn't seem bothered in the slightest. So, what's the next move, Fry? From the shadows emerged Ghost Umbra, the assassin who had already caused countless disasters for the enemy. We've come too far. Any further, and we'll reach the point of no return. Though they had advanced deeply, retreat was still an option. For now. But once they crossed a certain line, they'd be trapped, surrounded by enemy forces from both sides. Fry nodded. He had already considered that possibility. We'll stop here for the night and decide how to proceed from this point on. Hearing that, Ghost narrowed his eyes. Frey's vague answer made it clear. He had no intention of stopping. Ghost's earlier assessment had been both right and wrong. If they were surrounded, many would die. But the strong, those with true power, might still survive and escape. As for the weak, their fate was sealed. Fry seemed ready to sacrifice them without hesitation. That's what Ghost had come to understand from watching him these past days. Then there was that strange squad he had gathered. Except for Celine, they were all monsters. Beasts willing to follow him to the bitter end. No matter how one looked at them, that was a death squad. Sansa, too, seemed completely unfazed. As long as Fry was intent on marching forward, she would support him without question. Or rather, she seemed to be enjoying every second of it. A demoness like her thrived on despair, death, and destruction. The only ones not thinking with such twisted logic were the regular soldiers, and a few select individuals. Uriel Platini and Celine were among them. They stood silently, staring at the corpses and blood all around them. Celine was the first to speak. Lord Starlight, forgive my rudeness, but is it really necessary to go this far? Merciless slaughter, ruthless killing. From the very beginning, Fry had made himself clear. No mercy. We spare no one. That's what he had told them at the start of the raid. And he followed through with every word. He had shown no mercy, not even to those who surrendered. I know the Ultras are the evil side here, followers of demons who deserve death. But I can't help but wonder if this is truly the right path. Celine said hesitantly, while Ghost stared at her with his dead eyes. She had voiced what many others had been thinking. And Frey's answer came immediately as he approached her, still soaked in the blood of those he'd killed. Your name's Celine, right? He asked gently, causing her to nod nervously. Very good, Celine. Then allow me to correct a few misconceptions in your last question. Staring at the corpses of the Ultras, he spoke. There's no such thing as good and evil here. You too, it seems, are blinded by the tales they feed you inside the Empire's walls. Ha! Celine looked puzzled, but Fry was kind enough to explain. Do you really think everyone we've faced so far were evil monsters who deserve to die? Sorry to disappoint you, but most of them were just ordinary people. Some may have lived more righteously than us. True, the Ultras were demon followers. But most of them were just victims forced into that fate. Many were simply humans born with demonic blood in their veins. There's no such thing as good or evil here. What stands before you are enemies. Enemies you must eradicate. That's all. Whether righteous or corrupt, criminal or kind, it didn't matter. As long as they stand on the other side of the battlefield, that's all that matters. They won't hesitate, and neither will we. That was the grim reality they lived in. A reality Fry had accepted long ago. You'd best get used to it. This is just the beginning. With that, Fry ended the conversation, leaving Celine in silent confusion. Unlike her, the others didn't seem the least bit surprised. In that moment she realized she had been spending her days among monsters. Chapter 503, Sweet Poison. Fry Starlight's POV. The 8th day since the second round of this war began. The Ultras are acting strangely this time. Their movements are vague, sluggish, full of openings, almost as if they're not taking the situation seriously at all. Leaning with one hand on the simple meeting table the soldiers had set up for me, I sat there listening to the report of a certain young man. He looked close to my age, though he was shorter, with long blonde hair and a lean young man, suited for an assassin. One of the 8 who had chosen to follow me that day. His role wasn't fixed, but thanks to his speed, I had been using him as a scout. "Your name is Theo, right? I'd like you to elaborate." Ghost Umbra, who was also present, cut in. Theo nodded lazily. "We ventured deep into enemy territory, as you all know. We're so far from our allies that the enemies are technically much closer to us. Considering the damage we've dealt in the past few days and the growing reputation of Commander Fry Starlight, we can be seen as a legitimate threat." He laid out the facts bluntly. Yet despite that, they haven't shown any significant response. They're letting us do as we please. When I scouted ahead to uncover their plans, I found that they were still advancing at the same pace as before, as if everything we had accomplished these past days was just an illusion. "When you put it that way, I can't help but agree," said Uriel, who sat to my right, turning to face me. "The enemy's behavior is odd, and based on what you told me about that witch, Beatrice, I fear this may be yet another one of her games. A game even crueler than the last." Uriel said those words with a hidden implication, like she was trying to persuade me to pull back. Staring at her, then into the void before me, I found myself pondering the current situation. As was mentioned, things were progressing far too smoothly for us. Suspiciously so. Uriel was right. This was most likely one of Beatrice's traps. The way that Demoness played her game, her strategies, her view of life, her preference to toy with others from behind the curtain rather than attack directly, I couldn't help but compare her to him. The other demon who used the same style. Beatrice, a demon I hadn't written much about, and yet after clashing with her several times, I became fully aware of her existence. She was similar to him, to Weskier, the 4th-ranked demon. She felt like a smaller, lesser version of him. But even a lesser version of that vile monster was enough to cause this kind of devastation. Beatrice alone had pushed the Empire to the brink multiple times. And this time she wasn't alone. The black faction of demons had sent numerous high-level figures to stand beside her. "They won't join the war. Not yet." Those were the words of Zebar, the 10th rank. But thinking about it again, I couldn't help but wonder, when exactly will they? There's another war raging behind the scenes right now. What we're fighting here is merely the outer layer, a secondary event in a much greater spectacle. I don't know who exactly leads the human side of this war, but what I do know for certain is that the demons are far, far stronger. They are a unified race that the rest of the world once rallied against, and still failed to defeat. So no, I've never been optimistic about this war, not since the arrival of Zebar and Geppetto. Their descent shattered everything, scattered all plans. We're dancing on the edge of a cliff now. At any moment, could all flip upside down, bringing my attention back to those around me. Ghost, Uriel, and the 8 members of my squad who patiently waited for my decision. "We'll resume our advance into enemy territory starting tomorrow." The moment I said that, silence swept through the room. Expected, since I had just gone against the flow. "You'll get everyone killed that way, Lord Starlight," said the old witch Zenith, a hint of confusion in her tone. She didn't seem to oppose the decision itself. She had mentioned not long ago that she was simply searching for a place to die. Still, she gave her opinion, likely being the most experienced among us. "At least give us a reason, Lord Starlight, rather than asking us to walk blindly to our deaths." This time, it was Celine who spoke, her eyes reflecting the growing doubt within her heart. Those 8, including Celine, had once shown their willingness to follow me into hell if needed. But even they weren't immune to doubt, and that was only natural. She asked for a reason, but there was no way she'd ever understand the truth, so I could only respond vaguely. I can't explain my motives to you, but you all need to understand. This is the best decision we can make right now. Looking each of them in the eye one by one, I declared, I won't stop any of you if you wish to withdraw. I won't force anyone to follow me. The only thing I can promise is that I'll always be the one leading this war from the front. The first one the enemies will face. The first to take the blow, the spell, the strike. All of it will come at me first because I will always be the one charging ahead. The soldiers behind me will only ever see my back. And nothing else. I will always shoulder the greatest burden. But I won't guarantee anyone's life. I felt the need to make that clear. We were in the middle of a war, after all. The idea of saving everyone in a war was nothing short of utter foolishness. No matter how strong I was, no matter what I could do, people would die one way or another. It might sound hypocritical coming from me, but it was the truth. Perhaps I seemed like I was dragging all these soldiers to their deaths, but that wasn't necessarily the case. If monsters like Zebar joined the war, it wouldn't matter whether someone was at the front lines or the rear. Death awaited them either way. I couldn't face someone like him at my current level. That's why I had to grow stronger, fast. That's why I was desperate to move forward. The path of blood was my only refuge. I had no choice but to kill more and more enemies. That was my only option. I didn't have any brilliant plans, nor any airtight strategies. Against absolute power, against monsters like Beatrice and Weskier, who surpassed me in cunning and intellect, plans were meaningless. All I could do was keep moving forward and pour everything I had into gaining more power. Nothing else. That's all I have to say. Please relay my decision to the troops. To those who wish to continue, I'm grateful. And to those who choose to run away now, I won't blame or criticize you. I just want to make this much clear. With everyone's eyes on me, including Ghost and Uriel, both of whom were staring with mixed emotions. I stood up and left the meeting. Chapter 504. No turning back. When I stepped outside the simple tent that had hosted our discussion, I realized the sky had already gone dark. Night had fallen. After 8 straight days of battle, the number of soldiers following me had dwindled drastically. From the 1,000 I'd started with, barely a bit over 100 remained. This was no longer an army. Just a small battalion that had lost its way in enemy territory. The rest had either run away or died in past battles, their lives and deaths. My decisions had clearly played a role in them. I was the one who dragged them here. Maybe their souls would come to rest on my conscience. Maybe that was why I felt this growing burden on my shoulders, this strange weight and pressure. As I wandered through the few tents that remained in our crude camp, a bitter smile crossed my face. What difference does it make now? I've borne far heavier burdens than this. This was the price that had to be paid. Unlike the past, the number of souls tied to me had grown immensely. This time, I wasn't just haunted by the faces of my father, Clanna, or Danzo. The faces that appeared before me now were of people I never even got the chance to know. Darker than black itself. So lost in my solitude, I'd forgotten I wasn't alone. Having walked far enough from camp, I was now out of sight. Far enough for her to emerge. You've been so quiet lately. I almost forgot you were even here. Those words were for the demoness who stepped out from the shadows. I felt this was the right time to appear again, said Sansa with a gentle smile. Her words brought me back to something she'd said before. Darker than black. What exactly did you mean by that? I asked, as we strolled together through the barren wastelands of the Ultra's lands. The sky above us was the only living thing in this dead place. With her hands clasped behind her back, Sansa took the lead. I followed without hesitation. She took her time answering. Do you remember what I told you a long time ago? When I defeated you and the others in our friendly spar? She answered my question with another question. To be honest, I couldn't recall it clearly. But after thinking it through, I realized she was talking about that match I'd lost alongside Snow and Demon. That's quite an old memory you've dug up. If I'm not mistaken, your hair was still blonde back then. She was still the human princess whose connection to me I couldn't quite define. And I was still trying to find some meaning in my life after winning the Victoriad. I remembered that much. But the exact words she said back then escaped me. Your darkness is lukewarm and weak. Those were my words to you. Sansa didn't give me time to respond. She said it herself. But now, it's darker than black. The abyss inside you has grown so vast. I fear it might consume you one day. That much, I already knew. I don't know exactly what your demonic eyes see, but nothing has changed. Not now, not in the past. And not in the future either. That abyss would only grow until its shadow stretched far and wide. Are you even capable of carrying that weight? She asked. What I know is that I will carry it, whether I have the strength or not. Come on. It's not like I'm going to collapse or something. I chuckled, pointing at her. You're here after all. Hearing that, she nodded. That's exactly why I chose to appear now. As I drew closer to her, I began to realize just how important it was to have Sansa by my side. I wasn't sure what exactly I felt toward her, but whatever it was, she felt like a sedative, a potent drug that threw me far from reality, even if only for a moment. Something that made me forget all the burdens crushing my shoulders. It might sound cruel of me to say this, and perhaps unfair to Sansa, who was willing to do so much for me. But that's simply what I felt toward her right now. I couldn't call it love. Like I said before, she was more like a sweet-tasting narcotic. One that helped me hold myself together just a little longer. That's how I viewed her. And from the looks of it, she already knew that, and accepted it. Maybe, alongside her own feelings, she too had developed the same twisted perspective about me. Perhaps I was her drug. Her own escape from the shadows of life. She understood her role. That's why she showed up before me in this moment. Sansa, my gentle sedative. Ultra's continent. At the very heart of the continent, on the main side that housed the strongest forces of the Empire's enemies, stood the central base of the Higher Blood. A city swallowed by wastelands like many others, but it was still in far better shape than the rest. With towering walls and dazzling lights that made it glow amidst the desert. This city had become the beacon of the war effort for the Ultras. It was known as Nithios. Most of the Hire's forces were present. It was always alive. Its flame never dimmed, neither day nor night, as soldiers marched back and forth throughout the streets. Two men watched everything from atop one of the taller buildings in the area. They stood side by side, gazing down at the very men who had chosen to follow them blindly. The first was an old drunk, dressed in tattered rags. Nothing about him stood out except the cursed sword on his back. The second was his opposite, a composed and elegant man, whose only similarity with the old drunk was the fact that he too carried a blazing weapon. Silence loomed between them for a long while, until it was finally broken by Murgo, whose eyes never left the faces of the soldiers below. New faces come every day, and the old ones leave. Funny how quickly I forget them. Hearing this, Gavid Lindman responded flatly, not even looking at him. That's normal. They leave to fight. And besides, I doubt a senile old man like you even remembers faces to begin with. Murgo had never seemed particularly sane to anyone. The drunk smiled slowly. War, huh? Do you really think that's what we're fighting? You think we're playing games then? Gavid grumbled, clearly annoyed. This was how every conversation with the old man went. Maybe we are Lindmen, because to me it all feels like a grand show. Not a war. That made Gavid turn to face him. A play to some, a war to others. It all depends on how you look at it. A war tangled in clashing currents. Or a theater with no one truly knowing the script. To Murgo, there wasn't much difference between the two. But there was one thing he was certain of. We're dying, Lindman. dying slowly. His words carried many meanings, most notably the recent deaths of so many of their people on the battlefield. "We made a deal with the devil," the drunk murmured. Gavid nodded. "We did. With more than one." They both knew. There was no turning back now. Not since the day they created that gate that allowed those demons to come through. "I keep wondering, did we make the right decision?" "I don't know," Gavid said. "But I know this much. At the very least, if I die this time, I'll die because of my choices, not someone else's. Even if it all ended in ruin and death. At least this time, they were the masters of their own fate." Gavid Linman, the man who had once broken his demonic contract and turned on beings like Astaroth, he had always fought for what he called freedom. And to achieve his twisted goals, he'd made deal after deal. Deals that turned this war into a dark stage play. Despite knowing far more than most, both he and Murgo were still utterly clueless about how it would all end. Whether it was a pact with a vile demon, a strange prince, or an unnameable entity, there was no going back now. At the very least, they had earned the right to choose the place they would die. Or at least, that's what they chose to believe. Chapter 505. A Throne Built on Blood. The imperial capital, Belgrade. On the other side of the world, far from the battlefield, the citizens of the empire lived their lives as usual, far removed from the horrors of war. That, in itself, was a blessing. One they hadn't been granted during the last war that unfolded upon their own land. Ordinary people like them were the easiest prey for the enemy. It was true that all humans had gained the ability to manipulate aura centuries ago, but the majority never made any significant progress in strength. Millions remained stuck in the lower ranks for their entire lives. Only a chosen few were destined to rise and shine at the top. Now that these ordinary people had been spared the suffering of war, that alone had lifted a tremendous burden off their shoulders. Still, the tension hadn't vanished completely. This was just a temporary calm. What truly mattered was how the war would end. In the worst-case scenario, if the Empire's army lost, it would mean the end for many of them. Prince Aegon Valyrian was well aware of this. He knew that his people wouldn't sleep soundly if left in the dark. So, he ensured a continuous broadcast of the war's events. Always with just enough delay to give him time to manipulate the facts. He showed them only the victories, occasionally mentioning a few defeats to make the coverage feel more realistic for those still capable of critical thinking. By combining his skills and terrifying talent for manipulation, his plan succeeded flawlessly, turning an entire continent into spectators who saw and heard only what he allowed. Ever since the hard-won victory at the Bay of Sheskler, where Frey Starlight alone had turned the tide, the war had entered an entirely new phase. The best way to describe it, the calm before the storm. Forces from both sides clashed daily on the battlefield, and naturally hundreds died each day. The Ultras began using nightmare creatures, while the Empire responded by assigning at least one high-ranked combatant to every unit, enabling them to survive so far against both the beasts and Ultras alike. Yet, despite the bloodshed, this was merely the beginning. The real war would only begin when both sides committed their full power. All of the leaders, both Imperial and Ultras, knew this well. That's why they held back for now, engaging with caution and avoiding major risks. Of course, this excluded one reckless suicide squad that kept plunging deeper into Ultras territory without rest. The leader of that squad was none other than Frey Starlight, whose name had recently spread like wildfire. He became a symbol of inspiration to many, and a constant headache for people like Iris Sunlight, who no longer knew how to keep him under control. And yet, even in such a volatile situation, Prince Aegon Valyrian had still managed to exploit Frey, using his name to manipulate the hearts of the Empire's people. No matter how you looked at it, that infamous young man, Frey Starlight, was writing his own legend before their very eyes. In times of war, achievements and tales of battlefield heroes held the greatest sway over the masses. And that was exactly what Aegon Valyrian had gambled on. At this moment, the prince wandered alone through the countless halls of his family's imperial palace. Reviewing the latest war updates with great interest, more and more of them mentioned Frey Starlight. Like father, like son. Isn't that right? Aegon chuckled. Who would have thought that Fry Starlight would grow strong enough to become a monster akin to his father, Abraham Starlight, perhaps even greater. After all, in the War of Light, Abraham had already surpassed the age of 30, while Fry had thrown himself into this war at only 19. If he's given more time, he might even surpass him. Fry truly did resemble his father, in more ways than one. Just as the father had been used during the War of Light, the son was now fated to follow the same path in the War of Darkness. A devastating weapon on the battlefield, a symbol and hero off it, the Starlight family really has provided some excellent material all these years, Aegon muttered, stopping in front of a particular door. Without warning, he reached out to open it, only for a violent bolt of lightning to form out of nowhere, aimed straight at his head. A devastating strike carrying horrifying power. But Aegon casually deflected it with the back of his hand. Then, before it could crash into the ground and cause destruction, he swiftly extended his hand and conjured a black vortex that absorbed the lightning entirely. My foolish father really went all out hiding and fortifying this place. It had been concealed by high-tier magic, dozens of traps and barriers. That final lightning trap had been the last obstacle Aegon faced. He seemed annoyed, not only because he had to bypass these defenses, but because he had to disable them without leaving a trace. Not only that, he had reconstructed them afterward, making it seem like the room had never been breached. To do so, Aegon had demonstrated an immense level of power. Wave manipulation, magic, and more. Had anyone else witnessed what he had just done, they would have been utterly shocked. The prince's abilities were truly inscrutable. With a flick of his hand, Aegon pushed the door open and stepped into the frigid room. A room that no one even knew existed, contained nothing but ice, and a single glass coffin at its center. Aegon walked inside calmly. My father never left this room, annoyingly enough, which made it impossible for me to enter. As if he were hiding the world's greatest treasure in here. Throwing a glance at the man inside the coffin, Aegon's eyes gleamed for a moment, revealing an unreadable scowl, but it quickly shifted into a smile. Abraham Starlight, sleeping in such a dark place. You, who were supposed to be the brightest star of all mankind. What a joke. Aegon chuckled lightly, continuing to explore the place. But that man's obsession with you truly went too far. To the point of preserving your corpse for all these years. I'm starting to question his preferences. Mikar Valyrian had been utterly obsessed with Abraham Starlight, an obsession that made him view the man unlike anyone else. Abraham had been the blade that defended the legacy of the former emperor, Mikar, the man whose very presence kept enemies from breaching the empire's walls. The one who won wars and battles in his name. Their relationship had been purely transactional. Mikar used Abraham many times, and the Starlight family's shining star always executed the mission to perfection. He was flawless. Perhaps that's what drove the obsession. You never disappointed me, father. No, Mikar Valyrian. Having you recover this corpse really was the right call after all. Aegon couldn't help but laugh at how easy it was to manipulate the people he lived among. Humans really are fascinating creatures, driven by such trivial urges and emotions. Be it a maddening obsession with someone, blind faith in a false god, or shallow desires. They act just like animals, willing to do anything for them. The current war was the perfect example. An empire fighting with all its might, believing they're the righteous ones. Humans siding with demons, desperately trying to prove they are the true humans. Aegon paused for a moment, his smile deepening. A church, waiting for the right moment to strike and fulfill the will of their so-called god, and many others moving in the shadows, driven by goals and motives of their own. So many factions, so many variables, it truly entertained Aegon. This war will become the ultimate canvas of chaos. A masterpiece worthy of being remembered for ages. Placing his hand atop the coffin and gazing down at the sleeping man within, Aegon laughed. A masterpiece can't be complete without its brightest stars. Can it? As his words echoed, a strange dark aura shimmered from Aegon's hand, slowly creeping across the glass surface of the coffin. I wonder how Fry is faring on the other side. That young man who had endured so much, unaware of the truths unfolding behind the scenes. The future still held many stories for the warrior who continued to push forward. Chapter 506. The Executioner Chosen by God. The Ultras continent, eastern region. Somewhere deep inland, hundreds of kilometers from the coast, a certain squad was locked in battle against enemy forces. This marked the 14th day since the second phase of the war began. Fry Starlight and his comrades had pushed far forward, but with every terrifying advance he made, their numbers shrank drastically. From 1,000 men, only a few dozen remained. The reckless decisions of their commander, his strange, relentless choices, had driven many to flee, and most were already dead from the previous clashes. Now, Fry and the remnants of his unit were deep in enemy territory. They were under constant attack day and night. From the front, the back, the right, the left, the brutality of the Ultras hunted them endlessly from all directions. Fry Starlight was a true monster. Despite their unfavorable situation, he slaughtered every enemy in the end, no matter how many. By the time each battle ended, not a single Ultra survived. This was an undeniable truth. But even with his overwhelming strength, he was still only one man. He couldn't stop everything alone. Many soldiers would often die before Fry could even reach them with his blade. Even the strongest individuals in their unit couldn't always save them in time. After every fight, Fry would order the burial of every fallen comrade. The process often took a long time, as their bodies were mixed with those of the enemy, making the task exhausting and undesirable. Yet Fry did it himself, so no one else could object. Once they were done, they'd rest for just one night, before marching again under their commander's orders. This cycle repeated again and again, to the point that some began to lose themselves, trying desperately to keep up with his relentless momentum. Too much blood. That's what the saint candidate, Uriel Platini, thought as she witnessed it all with her clear blue eyes. At the end of yet another brutal battle, one that claimed the lives of many, Uriel wandered among the corpses, after healing all those who remained alive. In that field of death and blood, she often had to choke back the nausea rising in her chest. She wasn't accustomed to scenes like these, even though she had somewhat expected them. Reality and imagination were never the same. Uriel would always walk among the corpses at the end of every battle, making herself a witness to all that had happened. That was her way of adapting. To move forward as if nothing had occurred. Like Fry, like Sansa, and like the others from the Mad Squad who followed them. They could kill without blinking, continue without their hearts flinching. But no matter how hard she tried, Uriel couldn't do the same. Realizing this was only the beginning made it even worse. What exactly are you trying to prove here, Fry? Where was he leading them? Uriel Platini. She was the girl chosen to be the next saintess. She came to the war following in the footsteps of her predecessor, the current saintess Urasha. Then, when the time came, Uriel escaped, following Fry. She had already known, vaguely, that he would make such a move. That's why she came with him. With you. I felt like I could run away from them. But now, she found herself trapped in this land of blood and death. It felt like she'd escaped one dark fate, only to fall into something even darker. There, among the corpses, Uriel drowned in her thoughts, clutching tightly at her sleeves, trying to suppress the growing pain that had been getting worse lately. Completely lost in her own world, she was finally pulled back to reality when she heard a voice nearby. "O Hollow One before all creation, grant me silence, and drench me in forgetfulness. Let my shadow consume me, and let my eyes see nothing but the end." Someone was reciting a prayer, a kind Uriel was quite familiar with, one only uttered by the devout of the church. Unknowingly, her feet moved her toward the source. The man reciting it was someone she had seen quite a lot in the past few days. a man with terrifying features that set him apart from other humans. She had never seen a man with such an absurd amount of muscle, standing well over 2 meters tall, shirtless with a torso covered in scars. He sat quietly reciting prayers in front of both allies and enemies' corpses. Uriel recognized him as one of the 8 strangers who followed Fry the heretic Grimm. Grimm noticed her presence and paused his prayers to greet her. "Ah, Saintess Platini, what an honor." He said it with a repulsive smile that sent chills down her spine. "The sun will soon set, and with it, the souls of these poor souls will fade. Some will find paradise, others torment. Saintess Platini, let us pray for them together." He smiled as he invited her, but Uriel couldn't say anything. Her tongue failed her. Still, for some reason, she never felt comfortable around this man. Grimm the heretic, a former servant of the church. Specifically the Inquisition division. He had been excommunicated long ago and was banned from ever entering the Holy Island again after causing a massacre that left dozens dead. Among his victims were reportedly children, not even 10 years old. Children, men, women, all slaughtered brutally. When asked about his motives later, he claimed he was merely following the orders of his so-called God, the Lord of Light. He was labeled insane, sentenced to death multiple times, but always managed to escape. And somehow, now he stood at the vanguard of the war. "What's wrong, Saintess Platini?" Grimm asked. Uriel answered with a faint smile. "Forgive me, I was lost in thought for a moment." Sitting beside him, she began reciting her own prayers, prompting Grimm to smile even wider and join in. It didn't take long, but by the time they were done, night had already fallen. As Uriel caught her breath, she found her gaze drifting to Grimm, who remained in deep prayer. For a moment he looked like a devout believer. But she couldn't help remembering the truth of the monster who crushed enemies' skulls with his bare hands throughout the past days. Grimm the heretic. Renowned for his physical strength and iron-crushing grip, he never lost his smile, even when splattering brains. In terms of body count, Grimm had killed more enemies than anyone else, second only to Fry Starlight. But what set his victims apart was the horrific state he left them in. He seemed like a beast who genuinely enjoyed blood and slaughter. And that same beast now sat beside her, praying for the souls of his victims. That man was anything but normal. Once he finished, he stood as well. "Thank you, Saintess Platini. Let us continue purging this world of evil and follow in the footsteps of the hero, Fry Starlight." "Ah, of course," Uriel smiled, giving a slight nod, but she couldn't ignore a certain detail. "Perhaps I misheard, but did you just say, the hero Fry Starlight?" The word hero could be interpreted and used in many different ways. Anyone in this world could be called one. What Grimm had said wasn't necessarily strange. But, for the followers of the church specifically, that word held a very particular meaning. It wasn't used lightly, it referred to only one person, the promised hero, the one chosen by the Lord of Light. For a devout servant of the church to use it to describe Fry was unthinkable. Grimm, with his eyes still closed and that ominous smile on his face, turned back toward Uriel. "Is Fry Starlight not a hero of this world?" "Excuse me?" Uriel asked, puzzled. But Grimm continued, "The Lord of Light is the one who grants us humans our blessings and grace. He guides us. He gives us strength to carry on. Fry Starlight was born with immense gifts, power beyond comprehension, and that power could only come from the Lord of Light himself. Heroes aren't always radiant. Sometimes, they're born in the dark." Grimm spoke with absolute conviction, entranced by the man he followed. "He is the executioner placed upon this earth by our Lord to sever the necks of all heretics. Even if he denies it, Fry Starlight is one of the Lord's chosen heroes, a true one, who delivers justice through blood and fire." Grimm was entirely captivated by the portrait of carnage Fry had painted. He truly believed that such overwhelming power couldn't have emerged from nothing, that it was a divine gift from his so-called God. That was why, Grimm had chosen to follow Fry. Because to him, Fry was the true executioner. Uriel listened to this madness in silence, only further confirming the twisted nature of the squad that followed Fry. The man himself never believed in the Lord of Light, not even once. Yet Grimm insisted he was one of the Lord's heroes. Grimm wasn't a devout believer. He was simply a lunatic. One who delighted in death and bloodshed. A beast who justified his atrocities in the name of the God he claimed to follow. Standing beside such filth, remembering the vision she once saw in the past, Uriel couldn't help but wonder what kind of future awaited them, and what exactly was Fry Starlight trying to reach. For now, he continued to walk ahead. Slowly, quietly, he followed a path that led him toward an entirely different breed of monsters. Chapter 507. When Corpses Touched the Sky 1. Fry Starlight's POV. How is a warrior supposed to wage war? That question had haunted me these past few days. It had been half a month since I recklessly charged into enemy territory. I'd pushed so far in that we were now surrounded on all sides. Since the 10th night, we've been unable to advance any further. The enemy kept attacking without pause. Many have already died, and only a few dozen remain from my original special unit. We've fought 13 battles so far, and we've won them all. Yet we paid a heavy price. A price paid with the lives of our men. Lord Starlight, I beg you, let's retreat. We've already accomplished our mission. No, we've achieved far more than expected. No one would blame us if we pulled back now. On the 15th night, a soldier, one whose name I didn't even know, clung to me, pleading with every ounce of his being. He was far too weak to escape on his own, not when we were surrounded by enemies. So he had no choice but to stick with me and the others, but even that was reaching his limits. He looked terrified, hopeless. So many have died. We're dying every day, and I no longer understand what we're doing this for. You refuse to tell us anything. Lord Starlight, we followed you because we believed in you, in your overwhelming power. But all you do is butcher the enemy, indifferent to everything else. His words were painfully true. The others clearly agreed. I could see it in their eyes. Please, let's retreat and regroup with the others. If we keep going like this, there will be no one left but you. We'll all die. As that nameless soldier trembled in my arms, begging for his life, I remained silent for a while. The rest of the soldiers shared his fears, and the only ones unaffected were the criminals I had deliberately chosen to include in my squad. Among them, I saw the apostate Grimm step forward. And from the way he moved, it was clear he intended to do something to the soldier kneeling before me. There was no doubt. He wanted to kill him. I had no choice but to stop him with a simple hand gesture. Thankfully, Grimm obeyed my orders without question, halting in place with that sick smile still plastered across his face. Truly, a troublesome squad I had assembled for myself. Back to the poor soldier, I gently placed a hand on his shoulder and gave my orders. We're staying here. If the enemy attacks, we'll fight. If they don't, we'll go to them ourselves. Nothing has changed. The moment I uttered those ruthless orders, I saw the light leave many faces, as if I had just pronounced their death sentences. The soldier before me tried to protest, but he froze as the killing intent from several people behind me descended upon him. He couldn't take another step forward. Many couldn't accept what I was doing now. Only a few madmen actually enjoyed it. I saw the hesitation clearly in Uriel, and in Ghost too. Even Sansa Valyrian couldn't grasp what I was trying to accomplish. Yet each of them had their reasons for staying by my side. Ghost, my partner in crime who chose long ago to carry my sins with me. Sansa, who decided to support me no matter how great the atrocity my hands might commit. As for Uriel, I honestly didn't know why she was still following me. Her nature should have made her stand against me, but she didn't. Instead, she kept helping in silence. Even when I read her thoughts, I couldn't tell what was happening in her heart. But since she never blocked my path, I had no choice but to thank her, and silently apologize to her again and again. Night, I would often isolate myself. Sometimes Sansa would join me, my only solace in solitude. Other times, I sat alone, reflecting on the changes happening within my body. Sitting atop the scorched sands of the Ultras continent, I could feel every cell of mine trembling. Under the veil of night, I breathed heavily as I watched the bloody circuits glow fiercely beneath my pale, fragile skin, just as that strange book had instructed me. I had spilled plenty of blood. I had killed thousands. My sword had become death incarnate on the battlefield. My thirst for blood had grown, and I spilled so much of it. In return, I began to feel like I was losing something important within myself. And yet, at the same time, I was gaining something. Power. The power I sought. The path of blood was bizarre. The more I killed, the sharper my blade became. My body began evolving, absorbing aura faster than ever. My muscles grew stronger and my level increased gradually. It felt like I was absorbing the souls of those I killed, stealing from them not just their lives, but whatever awaited them after death. This strange evolution came with excruciating pain that sometimes left me paralyzed. But I've been used to pain for a very long time. That's why I endured it and kept moving forward, unfazed. As long as I was gaining power, nothing else mattered. That night, I wandered alone in the darkness, haunted by ghosts bearing faces I had never seen before. Day 16. As expected, the Ultras attacked again. An early strike before the sun had even risen. It was a coordinated assault. They unleashed nightmare creatures alongside a significant number of knights who controlled those beasts with terrifying precision. Their numbers were immense, overwhelming, enough to drive despair into the hearts of the surviving soldiers still with us. As for me, when I drew my blades and threw myself into the fray, when my heart pounded and my muscles trembled uncontrollably, I found myself tearing through dozens of them in an instant. Mercilessly, I stole the light from their eyes. Human or monster, it made no difference. Before my blade, the only fate awaiting them was death. They kept coming, tightening the siege around us. Their numbers were terrifying. Thousands against mere dozens. And in such a situation, what I felt wasn't fear. It wasn't despair. Many had died already, yet I felt no sadness, no anger. I was pleased that they had sent so many. Chapter 508. When corpses touched the sky too. Ah! This means I get to kill plenty today as well. It was a brutal battle. I deliberately went for their strongest, leaving the weak to my companions. That way, Ghost and Uriel wouldn't be in real danger. They were strong enough to handle the rest. As for Sansa, she was a monster in the same league as myself, so I had no reason to worry about her at all. With the battlefield set, I could fight freely, ignoring the other soldiers on purpose. Whatever emotions threatened to surface because of them, I drowned them in bloodshed. My sword was too fast, my strikes too heavy and devastating for the enemy to handle. No matter how they tried to surround me, they couldn't stop me. At times, their blades and spears did find me. I'm not invincible. Taking some damage is inevitable, even if my opponents were much weaker. But the wounds they inflicted, after all their desperate efforts, healed almost instantly. Their struggle was meaningless. I saw despair wash over their faces because of that. But I forgot their expressions just as quickly as I stepped over their corpses. Drenched in blood, I would often feel nauseous, as if I were about to lose consciousness. Sometimes, it felt like I was dreaming, and when I finally woke from that dream, the battle would already be over. Wiping the filth and blood off my face, I turned to check on my companions, only to find the sun had already set on the horizon, and behind me lay nothing but corpses and severed limbs. Today, too, we had lost many. Burials had become a hassle. Our numbers had dwindled so much that we no longer needed to bury many. Death had already claimed most of us. Rest tonight, but don't lower your guard. The next battle could begin at any moment. After giving that hollow order, I would leave, abandoning the rest behind. Then, just like the nights before, my body would begin absorbing that strange power crawling beneath my skin. Sansa often came to me. She had noticed what I was going through, but she never said a word. Sometimes, she would hug me from behind, holding me for hours. Other times, she would just sit beside me, waiting for my suffering to pass. I still couldn't kill my emotions completely, and that made it harder to find the will to continue. But it was never about what I loved or hated. It was about what I had to do. The hours passed swiftly, ushering in a new day. Day 17. Once again, the Ultras attacked. According to the reports we had received so far, numerous skirmishes had broken out between the two sides across the front. That made me wonder. How had the Ultras managed to gather all these forces and focus them here, specifically on my location? The campaign they launched today was the largest yet. Standing at the front, I watched that overwhelming tide of enemies approach. Enemies whose war cry shook the heavens. In front of their endless legions, I drew my swords and took the first step. Just like always, stay close to me. I gave the order as I pulled out that black mask from inside my clothes. Wearing it, hiding my face behind its cold surface, I stomped the ground, shattering it beneath my feet, launching myself into the enemy ranks. Once again, I found myself drowning in that endless cycle of death and blood. Through the eye holes of the nameless mask, it felt as if I was seeing the world from a different perspective. Behind that piece of black metal, I felt a strange peace of mind. All unnecessary thoughts vanished the moment I put it on. That's why I came to prefer fighting with it on. Comforted me. And terrified my enemies, who died at the hands of a monster whose face they never even saw. The battle dragged on for hours, and as expected, it was brutal. When I finally killed the last soldier, I raised my head toward the sky, only to find it completely swallowed by darkness. Night had fallen. I felt an unbearable heat radiating from every muscle in my body, the fire and fatigue born from endless combat, from cutting and slashing without pause. Removing the mask from my face, a hot cloud of steam escaped my lips as I exhaled, then turned around to assess what remained behind me. The number of corpses was greater than ever before. As for the survivors, they were fewer than I had hoped. Sansa's voice brought me back to reality. Fry, all the soldiers are dead. Only 8 remain, along with you, me, Ghost, and Uriel. Ah, so they all died after all. Let's bury the dead and prepare for the next battle. I gave the order again, then helped with the burials of our fallen comrades, the unlucky ones who were dragged into this path of death I had chosen. When the exhausting task of burying them was finally over, after being forced to look at the hollow expressions of dead soldiers. Some had lost their heads. Others had their limbs torn off. Some were burned alive by stray fire attacks. They all died with fear and despair etched into their faces. They must have tried to follow me into the battlefield, hoping I would save them. But my focus had been locked on the enemies ahead, leaving me completely unaware of anything behind. After all, the Ultras had sent many of their strongest warriors. Dealing with those monsters had been my priority. As a result, I had no time to save anyone. Those men died because of me. That's a fact I cannot deny. Standing before their graves, there wasn't much I could say, so I simply walked away. On my way out, I noticed the bizarre walls and mountains being constructed from enemy corpses. Morval and Grimm were the ones gathering the bodies and building all sorts of things with them. Somehow, they had become close friends without me realizing. Thanks to them, our encampment had become a place that struck fear into the heart of anyone who dared approach it. Walls built from severed limbs. Mountains of corpses numbering in the thousands. It was certainly not a pleasant sight, but I didn't mind. In fact, I welcomed it. Maybe now, the Ultras would start sending their true elites, and then the real war would begin. Chapter 509. When Corpses Touched the Sky 3. Day 19. Fry, why do you wear that mask? Ghost asked me this during the next battle against the Ultras. He fought through my shadow, so he was always very close to me on the battlefield. It helps me suppress my emotions. That was my answer. I don't know when exactly it started, but the nameless mask I once feared had somehow become like a sedative, one that numbed all the unnecessary thoughts that had been plaguing my mind lately. It helped me a lot. When I said that, I noticed a hint of pain flash across Ghost's face. But he didn't say a word. He simply kept supporting me from the shadows as we slaughtered more and more enemies. The battle flowed smoothly. All 8 of the remaining soldiers, except for Celine, had surpassed the S+ rank, which made them capable of surviving on their own. Since Sansa and I always handled the strongest foes, the survival of the others was almost guaranteed, so long as they knew how to maneuver the fight. But even they began to suffer injuries once the enemy swarmed them with overwhelming numbers. It seemed they had finally reached their limit. Day 20. Between mountains of corpses and walls made of the dead, I stood with the remaining survivors of my unit, watching as waves of enemies marched toward us. It seemed the Ultras had finally decided to focus all their forces on us. Lord Starlight, thank you. Thank you for preparing the perfect stage of death for this old woman. Standing beside me, Zenith smiled at Death as she spoke. The rest of the squad looked just as ready. Seeing their final resolve, I gave a nod and placed the nameless mask over my face. At the very least, kill as many of them as you can before you die. Harsh as my words might have sounded, every single one of them shouted in unison, "Understood." They were a true group of madmen. Uriel pulled the trembling Celine close to her side, while I, as always, took the front. Today, we would unleash another massacre. With a dented shield, a torn cloak, and a mask stained with blood, with cursed black swords that brought only death and ruin, I charged again, letting this dead land of the Ultras soak up even more of its people's fresh blood. But this time, the battle was on a completely different scale. It felt like the entire Ultras vanguard had been summoned here. Even the candidates for the rank of Empyrean had arrived. I fought with everything I had, unleashing ignition alongside nameless judgment multiple times. Sansa, too, extended her shadows and drained all her energy. I saw Uriel push her sacred power to its limit, manifesting a strange angel behind her. Any who approached her were burned alive by the mysterious light it radiated. The rest of my squad fought like monsters, delivering a breathtaking display of brutality. This was without a doubt our longest battle. Painful, merciless war. Falling to my knees, I stabbed my swords deep into the ground. I fought the violent trembling in my body, panting nonstop, desperate to breathe in even a sliver of air. But all that filled my lungs was the thick, bloody mist. More fog than air. The battle had finally ended. It had lasted until morning. We held our ground for yet another day. But once again, our numbers had dwindled. When I turned around to check what was left behind me, I found myself surrounded by so many Ultras corpses that locating the surviving members of my squad took a great deal of time. The only ones near me were Sansa and Ghost, so I struggled to find the rest. Through the slits of the nameless mask, I checked them one by one, just as she wished. Zenith had died on the battlefield, lying there in a pool of her own blood, a massive crater tearing through her chest. Of the 8 who had chosen to join me, 5 were dead, and 3 had survived. I found Grimm sitting alone, whispering prayers. His body was covered in countless wounds. One so severe it had split his face and destroyed his right eye. And yet, despite everything, he sat peacefully among the dead, praying in silence. Morval had also survived, but had collapsed from blood loss. He had lost an arm and a leg. Grimm and Morval were the strongest among the 8. So their survival didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was Celine still being alive, protected by Uriel. The latter had managed to fend off every attacker thanks to that strange angel she summoned from nothingness. Her power exceeded my expectations by far, but I was genuinely relieved she survived. Taking a deep breath, I spoke, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Get ready. I doubt the Ultras will launch any more attacks. so we'll be moving out again soon. After launching such a massive assault, it was unlikely they would continue attacking. This was the perfect chance to advance after being stuck in this cursed place for far too long. So long that the mountains of corpses seemed to threaten the sky itself. But then, I felt Ghost's hand on my shoulder. We won't be able to go any farther, Fry. The main forces have already caught up to us. His words snapped me out of my daze, and that's when I realized they had arrived. The Imperial forces. We killed so many of them, Fry, that the Ultras were forced to focus all their vanguard on us, which meant there was no one left to stop the Empire from advancing. While we held them off here for days, the Empire pushed forward without needing to fight. We've carried the weight of this war alone, Ghost said, just as the Imperial troops drew closer and closer. That night, a new legend spread across the world. The tale of a single squad that held off the Ultra's vanguard for 20 full days. Chapter 510. The Nameless Slaughterfield 1. The Imperial forces had dispersed in an orderly formation across enemy territory, following the plans their commanders had meticulously crafted after much thought and preparation. The Empire's vanguard was divided into multiple units, each penetrating deep into enemy territory, while the main army advanced slowly behind them, maintaining its full strength. There were many vanguard units, each led by a commander strong enough to withstand whatever the enemy might throw their way. One of those commanders was Snow Lionheart, the Church's chosen hero. Following orders with unwavering discipline, Snow led his unit forward at a steady pace, clearing the path for those behind him. In the first days of the campaign, he and his companions faced countless brutal battles against the enemy's forces, monstrous legions that deployed nightmare creatures. But they held their ground thanks to the overwhelming strength within their ranks, particularly the Saintess Eurasha, who had reached SS+ rank. Many elite students had also been assigned to Snow's unit, including familiar names like the Witch Selena and the swordsman Dawn Polaris. It was their first real war, but they endured impressively well. Despite suffering casualties due to inexperience, things were going relatively well, at least until everything began to change. Just 1 week into the campaign, Snow and his unit noticed something deeply unnatural. Despite their continued advance, the enemy never attacked. At first, they assumed it was a psychological tactic, an attempt by the Ultras to wear them down through suspense and tension. And that's precisely what happened. The Empire's forces began moving forward on edge, unaware of when or where an attack might come. Days passed, but what they feared never came. The Ultras never confronted them. It was as if they had vanished from the map entirely. The Empire scouts often found clear traces on the ground, proof that enemy armies had indeed been there. Yet for reasons unknown, the Ultras had changed course, deliberately avoiding contact. It was baffling, and so Snow attempted to communicate with the other vanguard units, only to discover they were experiencing the exact same phenomenon. What the hell is going on? Tension spread through the soldiers' camps. Confusion reigned. Isn't this supposed to be a war? Aren't we on enemy soil? Then where is the enemy? Those were the questions on everyone's lips. The Empire remained stationary for several days. But given the bizarre circumstances, High Command finally ordered the forces to continue deeper into enemy territory. It was risky, dangerous even to venture that far into a vast unknown. They lacked the numbers to cover such a wide area, which meant the risk of being surrounded by enemy forces was high. Still, the Empire had no choice but to trust their mages to detect danger in time and press forward. And so, the scattered units regrouped and advanced together, trying to uncover the mystery. Eventually, after a long and exhausting march, they began to notice the signs. Signs of battle. No, signs of massacre. The land had been dyed crimson, souls extinguished, monsters slaughtered. Before them were the remnants of a brutal war they were meant to fight. But someone else had fought it first. What kind of battle happened here? One soldier asked, stunned by the scale of destruction that had torn through the landscape, especially the massive sword marks carved into the earth. as if an ancient giant had unleashed its wrath and scarred the world in its fury. The corpses weren't hard to identify. They belonged to ultras and to the nightmare beasts. And just as they were making sense of the scene, a report came in from the Empire's scouts. "Sir, we found freshly dug graves near the battlefield. We believe they belong to our own soldiers." The report spread. It was relayed from one commander to another until every soldier knew what had happened. Among all the Empire's forces, there was one unit that had not been with the others. One unit had fought the battle that left behind this trail of carnage. And so, the Imperial army pressed onward, haunted by the sights they'd witnessed. They thought they had seen everything, but just hours later they realized how wrong they were. As they advanced, they stumbled upon another battlefield. Another repeat of the same scene. Hundreds of corpses, torn ligaments, severed heads, burnt bodies, crushed bones. Every possible kind of mutilation lay scattered across the earth. They fought again here, won, and kept moving forward. The conclusion wasn't hard to reach, given the number of enemy corpses compared to the soldier graves left behind. By now, the truth was no longer a secret. They all knew which unit was responsible. Fry Starlight's. He had ignored all orders, cut off communications completely, and charged headfirst into enemy lines alone. He didn't rely on clever tricks. He didn't need tactical maneuvers. He fought from the front, with steel, fire, and overwhelming power. For the days that followed, they tried to catch up with him. But the deeper they advanced, the more they stumbled upon signs of a real war. In just a matter of days, Fry and his team had plunged into hell itself, outnumbered, alone. But they won. Every time, they buried their dead, and they kept moving forward. At first, the Imperial soldiers hadn't paid much attention to the first battlefield they discovered. Despite how gruesome and terrifying it was, it didn't seem like such a big deal. After all, most of them had experienced something similar in the early days of the campaign. But then came the second scene, and the third, and the fourth. As the blood-soaked sights continued to repeat themselves, silence fell upon the soldiers. Their mouths closed shut, their faces darkened, and finally they began to understand. They had run with all their might, for days, but they never caught up with Fry and his group. All they found was blood and death in his wake. It seemed like that would be the only thing awaiting them for the days to come. But in the end, Fry and his group were still human. And humans have limits. No matter how strong they were, they would eventually be forced to stop. And that's exactly what happened. The Ultras had cornered Fry Starlight's squad, surrounding them from every direction. The enemy's spears were pointed at their throats, and there was no escape. Outnumbered, exhausted from the relentless battles they'd already endured, many of Frey's soldiers had lost the will to fight. Their morale had been shattered before their bodies even gave out. The Ultras besieged them again and again, day after day. They launched constant attacks against Frey's group, but no matter what the Ultras tried, they couldn't break them. At that exact moment, Fry and his few bore the full weight of the war alone, enduring the onslaught with nothing but sheer force of will. Then the Imperial army finally arrived. They reached the place where Fry and his companions had made their stand. The morning sun of the 21st day crept slowly across the sky, revealing everything. Thousands of Imperial soldiers reached the battlefield at last. But despite their numbers and valor, not a single one of them uttered a word. They stood there in stunned silence, as if they'd forgotten how to breathe, let alone speak. And their eyes, they couldn't look away from the nightmare that unfolded before them. If the previous battlefields had been terrifying, then this was hell incarnate. At first, from a distance, they thought they were looking at mountains. But as they drew closer, they realized the truth. What they saw were corpses, stacked atop one another, forming hills that threatened to pierce the heavens themselves. All around, walls had been built from severed limbs and torn flesh. Scattered skulls littered the ground like gravel. The blood was so thick that it had turned into a lake, swallowing their feet. The blood mist was so dense that even seeing became a struggle. Before such a horrific sight, many of the soldiers collapsed on the spot. Some vomited. Others turned away, unable to look any longer. Even the toughest among them, Phoenix Sunlight, Snow Lionheart, even veterans of war like Bloodmater, their faces all darkened as one. It was in that moment they finally understood why the Ultras had suddenly disappeared, why they hadn't been attacked at all in the past days. The Ultras had taken heavy losses, so heavy, in fact, that they had been forced to send their entire vanguard to stop Fry and his team. As a result, this war was no longer one between the Empire and the Ultras. It had become a war between a single squad and an entire continent. Many of them were confident in their strength, in their abilities, but none of them could picture themselves surviving what Fry Starlight's squad had endured. Surrounded by tens of thousands of enemies, cut off for days on end, assaulted day and night by monsters and men alike, could they have endured it? The answer was obvious. For a long, long while, the soldiers stood still, unable to approach the graveyard of corpses before them. For death itself lingered there. And then, it happened. A shift. From amidst the mountains of death, a small group of people emerged. Only a handful remained, so few they could be counted on one hand. And among them, their leader. At first glance, he looked pitiful, wearing a strange black mask, a dented, broken armor, and a torn, tattered cloak. His body was drenched in blood, so much that his once white hair had turned crimson. But despite his miserable appearance, dread seized the hearts of all who dared look his way. His aura, his presence alone made their bodies tremble where they stood. A murderous, clinging aura crept over their skin, slow and suffocating, and they finally realized he hadn't just survived. He had endured. He had conquered. He had become death itself. Somehow everyone understood it. He was the one responsible for the blood-stained painting behind him. As he approached, all the Legion commanders stepped forward, surrounding him as they quietly placed him under arrest, dragging him away without a word. As for his remaining comrades, they received medical treatment and the care they deserved after all they had endured. Fry did not resist. He simply obeyed orders. And though he was arrested, he was never treated as a prisoner. Despite disobeying orders and leading his squad into what was essentially a death march, he was also the hero who bore the horrors of war in everyone else's stead. Before a presence like his, no one truly knew how to treat him. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like an executioner, a reaper sent to carry out divine judgment. The Ultras were monstrous, bloodthirsty beasts that ravaged the land, and to deal with them, the Empire birthed monsters of its own. This was Fry Starlight, and the battlefield in front of them was proof enough. Later, that place was named the Nameless Slaughterfield, a place where rivers of blood were formed, where bodies piled high enough to reach the heavens. Chapter 5:11. The Nameless Slaughterfield, 2. It didn't take long for the world to hear the news and realize what had happened. As a result, all major factions began moving accordingly. To the Empire, it was the birth of a miracle. To the Ultras, it was a curse unleashed upon them. A curse of Abraham Starlight's caliber. Fry entered the war with 1,000 elite warriors. In the end, only 7 remained, including him. Yet those 1,000 managed to obliterate the entire vanguard force of the Ultras. More than 30,000 soldiers, along with 10,000 nightmare beasts. And if one counted the earlier losses at the Bay of Shiskler, the Ultras had already lost over 50,000 troops. An enormous loss, a catastrophic blow. And so all the major figures of the Ultras gathered in a single place. Inside a grand chamber built for kings, the true ruling power of the Ultras held a summit unlike any before. At the center stood Murgo, Lord of the Dark Hive, commanding everyone's attention. Clearing his throat, he spoke with the relaxed tone of an old drunken man. "Gentlemen, thank you for answering the call." His words were mostly directed at Beatrice, who stood elegantly with her arms crossed, and Dragoth, the beast, seated calmly behind her. "We've gathered today in response to the complete annihilation of our vanguard at the Bay of Shiskler." Murgo sighed with genuine irritation, only to be interrupted by Beatrice, who arrived using one of her dolls. A beautiful puppet with flowing black hair, pale white skin, and bright green eyes, a mischievous smile gracing her face. Tilting her head, she calmly said, "So what? Everything that's happened is still within expectations. The Vanguard was meant to die there." The moment she said that, the pressure in the air grew abnormally heavy. The source? Dragoth. He stared at her in silence from across the hall, his eyes slaughtering her 100 times over, but he did not move. Standing beside him, Gavid Linman made sure Dragoth didn't act recklessly. Even if Dragoth had grown more composed since his return, the madness was still there. Whatever had happened to him during his long imprisonment in the Empire remained a mystery. One even he couldn't recall, but it left its mark. Due to the nature of their pact, Gavid couldn't allow Beatrice to die. He had to keep Dragoth in check. Murgo quickly stepped in to close the matter. "I know this was within our expectations, but it happened far sooner than we planned. And more importantly, the Empire suffered no losses. The Vanguard was supposed to inflict massive damage on the Empire and hold their position longer. Yet despite their overwhelming numbers, they achieved next to nothing. A variable has appeared. One we didn't anticipate," said Murgo. To which Beatrice replied with a smirk. "Fry Starlight, correct?" Murgo nodded, and Gavid confirmed. "We can't allow him to continue growing. If he does, he'll become an obstacle to our greater plan." Fry Starlight had already shown power rivaling the top of the SS Plus tier. His explosive and rapid growth wasn't natural, it was insane. All of them could feel it. If left unchecked, he might evolve into something far beyond their comprehension. "He must die in the next battle," Gavid Linman declared. At that moment Dragoth stood. Abraham's son. Clenching his fist, his eyes glowing blood red, he finally moved. "I'll handle him myself." And so, without warning, the true power of the Ultras decided to step onto the battlefield. They seemed determined to repay the debt. Faced with such unwavering resolve, Beatrice could only sigh and shake her head in pity, somewhat impressed by their ignorance. "Fry Starlight." She whispered his name with a faint smile, her fingers toying in the air. "There's no need to worry about him. He's already fallen." The witch chuckled softly as she turned to leave, abandoning the others in complete ignorance of what her words truly meant. At the same time as the Ultras gathering, something strange was occurring on the Empire side. Inside a sealed room that now served as his cell, one person sat hunched over on his bed, his body trembling uncontrollably. Fry Starlight, the miracle-born monster, was alone, suffering from something he could not comprehend. From out of nowhere, violet sparks began to explode around his body. The tremors intensified. Fry, his eyes tightly shut, tried to suppress the phenomenon by force. Activating shadow adaptation, he focused on manipulating his aura with absolute precision, forcing it under his control. Lately, his power had been increasing without end, especially after slaughtering all those souls. It felt as if he was slowly becoming something entirely different, a monster of a caliber unlike anything else. He had spent his recent days in the cell trying to assimilate the new power within him. But now, that power had broken free of his control. No matter how hard he tried to subdue it, it raged harder, threatening to consume him entirely. Even with shadow adaptation, it never calmed. The violet sparks of aura continued erupting more violently, destroying everything around him. A thick, black, viscous substance began crawling from beneath his skin, spreading through his bloodstream like a cocoon. Fry noticed it immediately. Thanks to his full-body awareness and intimate understanding of his internal structure, he realized that blackness was foreign, something that wasn't there before. Whatever it was the source of the frenzy within his power. He cursed under his breath, completely unaware of what was happening to him, until, without warning, his eyes widened. A voice whispered right beside his ear. "Return it." The voice was strange, yet oddly familiar. His power surged, threatening to engulf the entire room. And Fry, more lost than ever, could only sit in silence. "Return it. It belongs to me." In that very instant, hearing that voice, he began to understand. At the same moment, the system's interface flared to life. Final mission. Mission description. Weskir's shadows have swept across the world. The hunt has begun. It's a race against time. Who will hunt down whom first? Disaster is inevitable, and your blade may very well determine the outcome of the coming war. Before it's too late, eliminate Weskir's shadows. First shadow, the eternal witch, Beatrice. Second shadow, the Death King, Thanatos, also known as Geppetto. Third shadow, the one-man army, 10th ranked high demon Zebar. Fourth shadow, Fry Starlight. Chapter 512, The Curse Within. Imperial Camp. Late that moonlit night, most soldiers had already fallen asleep, preparing to march out again soon. Despite the camp's massive size, it remained eerily quiet. The only sources of light were scattered campfires. The only ones awake were the unlucky soldiers assigned to patrol duty, in case something unexpected occurred. Deep within the camp, there was a simple cell. A temporary prison holding one specific individual. The man whose name had become the talk of every mouth. He was the hero of the war, and because of that, no one dared overstep their bounds with him. Since being locked up in that cell, he had only spoken to a few high-ranking officers who came by occasionally to question him, hoping to understand his motives. Lord Starlight's behavior had baffled many. No one could say for certain whether he was a hero or a monster. The answer remained unclear, but so far he had remained quiet, and that, at least, had given them some comfort, which is why only a single guard had been assigned to watch over him. And even that guard had dozed off that night. It was a calm, silent night, but inside that prison cell things were anything but peaceful. There, in that dark and desolate space, his violet aura blazed violently, crackling with bursts of purple lightning. Fry, eyes shut tight, was doing everything he could to suppress it. But the longer he tried, the worse it got. His power raged, shattering the floor beneath him and obliterating everything nearby. Realizing he was still losing control despite all his efforts, Fry clenched his teeth in fury. What the hell is happening to this cursed body? A thick black substance began to creep beneath his skin. His eyes glowed with violent intensity, and his aura looked ready to explode at any second. Beside his ears, strange voices began to whisper, demanding he return what he had taken from them. "Return it. It belongs to me. Return it. Give it back." Forced to endure the violent surge of his power, the crushing headache from trying to suppress it. And now those eerie voices whispering right beside his ear. Fry finally snapped. Veins bulged like writhing worms across his body as he let out a furious roar so loud. The guard outside jolted awake in panic. "Give it back. The only thing I'll give you is my dick." The moment his furious scream shook the cell, the guard burst in, finally reacting to the chaos. "What the hell is going on in?" He didn't finish the sentence. Fry knocked him out cold with a single strike. His power was now completely out of control. He had no choice but to move. "If my aura explodes here, they'll all die." Frey's aura wasn't a joke. It was the only stat of his that had reached SSS rank. It was impossible to predict the destructive range of such an overwhelming force. That's why he gathered his strength into his legs and leapt, blasting through the roof and soaring away from the camp as far as possible. His steps were so fast, they were nearly invisible to the naked eye. But his surging aura betrayed his position. He looked like a violet meteor tearing through the sky, destroying everything in his path. Crackling lightning danced around him like serpents escaping their den. Fry barely kept it under control, until he finally collapsed in a distant mountainous region. Unconsciously, he had crossed dozens of kilometers away from the camp, now lying among the jagged rocks and towering peaks. His aura erupted with even greater fury, destroying everything around him. The whispers grew louder by the second. The black substance crawling beneath his skin burned like molten lava injected straight into his veins. He no longer had the mental strength to even open his system. His entire focus was devoted to holding back the madness. "You've got to be kidding me!" Collapsed to the ground, consumed by chaos. Fry had become a violet sun lighting up the entire mountain range. As if dealing with all those bastard enemies wasn't enough. "Now I have to fight myself too." He rose again, his body glowing relentlessly. Fry took a deep breath, pulling out Nameless' mask and placing it over his face. "I didn't come all this way just to be messed with like this." And the moment he put it on, it was as if a spell had been cast over him. His mind stilled, like a raging sea whose waves had been crushed by force. He returned to stillness, to focus, opening both arms wide. He embraced his power once more and dragged it back in by force. "Just who do you think I am?" Resisting the pain, confronting whatever had invaded his body. Frey's power ignited with even greater fury. It was a breathtaking display of raw might, the very strength he had spent years building. Even if it tried to escape, it could never defy him. "Don't think for even a second that you'll bring me down that easily." Bit by bit, the frenzy subsided, and Fry finally began to regain control. He had demonstrated incredible growth and composure, staying centered even in the face of the unknown, even when his own body threatened to betray him. He neither panicked nor lost his grip for a moment. Took him a full hour to stabilize, but in the end, he collapsed onto the cold ground, gasping for air. Finally, that cursed voice is gone. The damn thing had tormented him until the very end, so much that Fry had been tempted to rip out his ears just to make it stop. But the screaming had echoed inside his mind, so there was no escape. Sitting on the frozen earth with his knees pulled close, Fry let out an irritated sigh. What kind of disaster landed on my head this time? It had come out of nowhere. No warnings, no signs. This was the first time his own body had refused to obey him. He cast a glance at the very body he'd shattered and rebuilt over and over again, until it had become this. A body forged like steel to perfection. The vessel that made him something beyond human. And now it wanted to betray him? Fry was confused, and in hopes of dispelling that ignorance, of finding some clue to this new dilemma, there was only one thing he could turn to, the system that had been with him since the beginning. He was about to open the interface when he froze, hands suspended mid-air, as a voice he hadn't expected to hear again anytime soon interrupted. "Seems my intervention wasn't necessary after all. You handled it better than I expected." That cold, cryptic voice, the one that had haunted Frey's nightmares. Despite his sharpened senses, Fry hadn't felt his presence at all. Lowering his hand slowly, Fry narrowed his violet eyes and turned toward the figure who had appeared here, among the mountain's desolation. Leaning casually against one of the massive boulders, wearing his tattered black cloak, the man hadn't changed at all. Only his eyes, those radiant, piercing blue eyes, like lamps piercing through the darkness, shone through his obscured features. Blue eyes that now reflected their glow against Frey's violet ones. Fry stood up, facing him directly. "As usual, you only show up when you feel like it." Chapter 513. The Architect of Ruin. Step by step he approached. "So, what is it this time? Some entity trying to hijack my body? Parasite? A demon seed? Or maybe it's your precious king?" I doubt that." Ignoring the sarcasm laced in Frey's words, the engineer simply shook his head lightly. "Neither of those. It's more complicated." Hearing that, Fry burst out laughing. "Of course it is. When has it ever been simple? That's just how our twisted little game goes, isn't it?" The engineer said nothing for a few seconds, merely staring at Fry. His face betrayed no emotion, but something was definitely churning inside his mind. "Why are you just standing there, staring at me like an idiot? Spit out whatever you came here to say. I don't want to look at your damn face any longer than I have to." It was clear Fry had neither the time nor patience for the engineer's games. He had already guessed this would be yet another setup. Another step in some pre-planned future. That's just how the blue-eyed manipulator worked. I see. You've changed, the engineer said suddenly, prompting a raised brow from Fry. Changed? Didn't expect to hear that from you. The engineer gave a rare, faint smile as he stepped away from the cliffside. Usually, by now, you'd be screaming at me, charging straight in, trying to kill me. Ah! Fry exhaled, a strange feeling washing over him. He couldn't quite put it into words. Like the feeling you get when your father reminds you of something stupid you did as a kid. Let's not do this now, he said. But the engineer pressed unexpectedly. Why not try attacking me? You've grown so much since the last time we met. You might even land a hit. What are you? Some kind of masochist who enjoys getting punched? If that's your thing, those statues of yours are probably more experienced at it than I am. Fry chuckled dryly, recalling for a moment his time with the likes of Smiley and Sad, definitely former torture experts, judging by the way they treated him. Bringing his attention back to the engineer, Fray's violet eyes lit up with an even fiercer glow. There's no point fighting you in my current state. I still can't see your true level. Fry hadn't attacked simply because he had no chance against someone like the engineer. Besides, he had now gained full control over his emotions. Emotions that had grown colder recently, making it easier to stay calm, even in front of this man. The engineer looked like he was about to say something, but Fry moved first. With no warning, he unleashed a powerful wave of aura. That said, let's see what kind of face you're hiding under that damn hood, engineer. Fray's attack wasn't aimed to hurt him. It was simply to knock off the hood he always used to conceal his face. I've grown tired of staring into those damn blue eyes all the time. He still couldn't fight him, but he could at least achieve this much. And for the first time, he did. For the first time ever, Fry revealed the engineer's face. He had expected to see some kind of old man, or perhaps a grotesque entity that would make anyone avert their eyes. But what stood before him froze Fry in place for several seconds. I see some things never change, the engineer said, after the hood covering his face was completely destroyed. As for Fry, all he could do was curse. What the hell? Why do you look better than me? The engineer's features were not at all what Fry had imagined. His face bore a pale, sickly complexion, like a man plagued by some terminal illness. His skin was lined with cracks, though oddly, they resembled tattoos that matched the mature air around him. He looked to be in his early 40s, with long sky-blue hair and radiant eyes that once signaled doom, now suiting him perfectly. No matter how long Fry stared, the engineer looked like a nobleman from another world. An air of royalty surrounding his every expression, his serious features making it nearly impossible to look away. Ah, so this body is just a vessel, isn't it? I assume it was crafted to look beautiful and hide your hideous original form. Fry sneered, but the engineer shook his head. Sorry to disappoint you, but my king made this vessel to resemble my original body as closely as possible. What you see before you is what I looked like for most of my life. Fry was visibly stunned. Should have left the damn hood on. Regretfully, he stole another curious glance at the strange man standing before him. Now that I've seen your face, I'm genuinely curious. Who are you, engineer? You were once the second strongest under your king, so I assume you were well known. A presence that must have carved a name for itself up there, in the higher realm. The engineer now stood as a broken vessel, worn by time. He had lost a great deal of his former strength, to the point that comparing his current state to his peak would be nothing short of insulting. And yet, even now, he remained a force strong enough to defeat most early-stage SSS rank fighters. Fry hoped to peel back some of the mystery surrounding the man before him, but the engineer showed no desire to answer any of Fray's questions. I'm not the one whose secrets you should try to uncover, he said. Your body, that body you're beginning to lose control of is... Fry groaned in frustration. At least tell me your name. I abandoned that name a long time ago. I believe I've told you this already. Such was the price of being one of the nameless. Fry didn't look convinced, but he saw no reason to press further. It was a rare kind of conversation they were having, one that, oddly enough, made Fry feel some strange connection to the man he had always hated. His perception had broadened. He was beginning to see things he couldn't before. He felt it clearly now. His fate was entirely entangled with this man, with the engineer. Speak. What's happening to me this time? Fry finally asked the most important question, and the engineer gave a subtle nod. What's happening to you is a mistake, one caused by me and Abraham. The mention of his father made Fray's eyes widen involuntarily. A mistake caused by you and my father. I can only think of that day. I'm glad you're finally connecting the dots. You're right, the engineer admitted, walking alongside Fry through the barren mountains. One of that demon's shadows is sleeping inside you. Weskier, Fry muttered, his expression darkening. That damned demon's been circling me forever, even though I haven't clashed with him directly yet. He's closer than you think, but even I can't detect him. His king's eye blocks me completely, the engineer said, clearly irritated at the mention of that demon. Weskier is incredibly cunning. He doesn't act without reason. On the day of our battle, mine and Abraham's, he could have killed you easily. You were right there in his arms. But he was forbidden from ending your life. His king didn't want you dead, so Weskier chose to play a different game. As the engineer laid out the situation, he showed a rare sense of dread. Weskier was a schemer on his level. Or perhaps even beyond it. Before we reached you that day, while you were still in his arms, he planted something inside you, something that wouldn't awaken unless certain conditions were met. And it seems you've now met those conditions. 19 years ago, Weskier emerged into the world and fought a colossal battle against the strongest humans. And the engineer himself. Chapter 514. The Saint Who Bleeds. He held Fry in his arms for only a brief moment, but in that fleeting instant, he concocted a plan, one born in mere seconds, and cast a shadow that would fall 20 years later. He planted his shadow inside Fry, then hid it perfectly until the right moment. The engineer turned to Fry, his expression grave. The awakening of that shadow inside you. You know what that means, don't you? Fry wasn't an idiot. He already understood where this conversation was heading. Whatever plan that rank 4 demons set into motion that day, it's finally begun, hasn't it? The future, the fate that Weskier wove through his king's eye on that day, was finally beginning to unfold. There are many forces on the verge of colliding, and the reappearance of high-ranking demons is proof enough. Brace yourself, Fry Starlight. You will soon have to fight them, face to face. Upon hearing that, Fry let out a forced chuckle. I know. I've been thinking about it day and night, and I don't expect any help from you, naturally. Staring at his open palm. The same hand that had wielded the sword all this time. Fry clenched his fist tightly. So, what exactly is Weskar's shadow, and how can I deal with it? Fighting enemies was one thing, but facing himself, that was an entirely different battle. Fortunately, the engineer answered. Weskar's shadow is more like a fragment of his being, a piece of his existence, a replica of himself that he plants inside his targets, in order to completely control them. Sometimes, the shadow fuses entirely with the host's soul, becoming something akin to a demon seed. Fortunately for you, your soul is fundamentally different from all other beings. Cannot merge with you, but it will try to take control of your body. As a result, your powers will become unstable, and that instability could affect those around you. At the time, Fry wasn't even aware of what had happened between him and a certain group of individuals who had already been affected. People who were now seeing the future through him. That's the shadow. As for how to get rid of it, let's see. The engineer paused for a few seconds before giving his answer. Let's say, your saintly friend, Uriel Platini, is the one who'll show you the way. Once again, Fry couldn't hide his confusion upon hearing a name he hadn't expected. There you go, speaking in riddles again. Uriel? How exactly is she supposed to help me? What? Is she going to pour her holy power into me until the shadow suffocates or something? Fry thought, then sighed in defeat. I'll find out when the time comes, won't I? The engineer nodded. Exactly, he said, then added hesitantly. My ability to intervene is fading by the day. Fry Starlight, this appearance before you. And this information I've just given you are likely the last pieces of help I can offer. There's an unspoken pact between those of us who pull the strings from the shadows. A pact that prevents us from playing this game ourselves. Until one of the sides breaks that rule, you're on your own. Fry Starlight. You've no choice but to carve your path through blood and overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way. The engineer spoke more than usual this time. That had been the case even before Danzo's death. Fry didn't know what that blue-eyed seer had seen with his power to glimpse the future, but the paths had entangled far too deeply with the eye of the king, making the future something no longer predictable. The future you want, and the fate Weskier has designed. Fry chuckled lightly. Nothing's changed. All I have to do is keep fighting until I shape my destiny with my own two hands. Big words for someone who stood no chance against the likes of Weskier and the engineer. But without a doubt, he had the potential. Potential great enough to climb to the very top. Yet the path before him was one paved in blood. Harsh, brutal, and not meant for the sane. I'll endure it to the end. The path of blood? Fry muttered, placing the nameless mask back over his face, hiding his expression once again. Standing beside him, the engineer stared at him for a while. This was the first time they'd ever spoken face to face. He had witnessed Frey's journey all along. He'd seen every rise and fall, every triumph and tragedy. In many ways, he understood Fry better than anyone in this world. Though he appeared emotionless, the engineer was not truly nameless. Somewhere behind those glassy blue eyes, something far greater resided. Turning his back to Fry, the engineer began to walk away. You asked me for my name earlier, he said, drawing Frey's attention one last time. The name is Gehrman. With that, he vanished completely, leaving Fry alone in the wastelands. Fry etched the engineer's image deep into his mind, and engraved that name into his memory. Gehrman, that was his name, a name he would never forget for the rest of his life. Fry turned and made his way back to the camp, even as the road ahead grew darker and harder. Back at the camp, just as Frey's turmoil reached its peak, inside her tent, sitting alone and reciting her prayers, Uriel clutched her arms tightly, as if trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. She had remained like that for hours. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she finally stood, preparing some cold water and setting up her bathing corner. Fate, I wonder, can we mortals ever escape a destiny written for us by our gods? As her mind pondered the answer to that question, she slowly began to undress. Uriel was a girl who had revealed nothing but her face, her head, and her hands. Everything else had always been hidden beneath the robes of a priestess. Having now sealed off her surroundings with holy power, she was finally ready to unveil her body and take a proper bath. Piece by piece, she stripped away her clothes, revealing her skin. No one had ever laid eyes on her body, the body that so many men had dreamed of. But the sight she revealed was nothing like what anyone might have imagined. Uriel's body was indeed mature. Seductive curves, a full chest, and a flawless figure. But on top of that white skin, there was another color. Red. As she poured cold water over herself, Uriel stared into the small mirror that had been gifted to her. She looked at her body, the body of a saint. With a sorrowful smile, she closed her eyes and finished her bath quickly. How ironic that those who are most revered for their purity are often the filthiest of all. In the modest room, the sound of cold water splashing echoed faintly, revealing everything that had been hidden by those who served the Lord of Light. Across her back, her arms, her neck, even on her thighs and legs. Sins were carved into her flesh in ink that would never fade. Strange letters that no one understood. They looked like ancient runes, etched deep into her skin, disfiguring her completely. Those letters glowed with a crimson-red light, and each time they did, Uriel endured the pain in silence. But her face didn't show the slightest reaction. Sitting there, soaked in cold water, she hugged herself tightly. Ah, this brings back memories. In her clear blue eyes, fleeting images flashed. Of a little girl who cried and cried until her tears had dried up completely, until the only thing left to shed was red. We're truly alike, Fry. Chapter 5:15. Scars Beneath the Halo 1. At the same time as Fry Starlight's sudden escape from his cell, a particular group exited one of the command tents near the front lines of the army. There were 5 of them. 4 humans and 1 demon. That old man's a real pain in the ass. Muttering through bloodied lips, Morval, his body covered in bandages soaked red from fresh wounds, grumbled bitterly after being forced to attend a long, exhausting meeting. He's a sinner worthy of stoning. My lord, forgive my weakness and helplessness. Grim muttered beside him, closing his one remaining eye in prayer. He was still cursing Iris Sunlight under his breath, the man bold enough to criticize the executioner chosen to serve the Lord above all. Alongside Morval and Grim stood Ghost Umbra, Sansa Valyrian, and Selene. Among them, Sansa stood out the most. Morval recalled her brutal fighting style. Like a true demon on the battlefield, showing no mercy to anyone. I look forward to fighting by your side again, Lady Valyrian, he said, extending his one good arm in a friendly gesture, but stopped halfway as he felt a suffocating presence engulf him. Don't touch me with your filthy hand, please. The ground beneath her darkened as Sansa turned to leave first, refusing to draw more attention than needed. Fight alongside me? You call that fighting? All you did was get your ass kicked. And judging by the sorry state you're in, I doubt you'll be doing much more. Waving him off, Sansa gestured for him to just go. Go die somewhere no one can see you. Your presence makes no difference. Shadow swallowed her whole as she vanished, leaving Morval behind to stew in her cold scorn. What the hell? The boss's girl is so cruel. All I wanted was to praise the way she slaughters people. So unfair. Kicking a stone aside, Morval sulked away, shoulders slumped. She's a vile little devil, Grim remarked coldly. But every executioner needs a loyal dog he can unleash when necessary. With his prayers complete, Grim turned to leave as well. As a religious fanatic, the very presence of someone like Sansa was naturally unacceptable to him. But Grim wasn't your average church zealot. He was more of a hypocrite who wore faith as a mask to hide the demons within. Sansa was too close to Fry, and Fry wouldn't let her die. So Grim showed up, hiding behind the flimsy excuse of faith. That's what Ghost thought as he silently analyzed the deranged people who had fought beside him. Morval, a bloodthirsty maniac. Grim, a fanatic who used religion to unleash the darkness inside him. And the third member, Selene. She had been quiet for a long time. Ghost couldn't understand why that girl wanted to stay by Frey's side until the end. Selene Veritra, a wave controller in her first year at the temple, currently at C+ rank. Not bad for your age. You use water as your primary element. Come from a modest background. As Ghost recited her profile aloud, Selene's blue eyes rolled toward the assassin standing beside her. I can understand why maniacs like them want to keep fighting. They were born to live on battlefields. But you're different, Selene Veritra. You went through hell with us and barely survived. He stepped in front of her, completely blocking her path. Your desire to keep following Fry after everything that's happened is irrational. You should have realized by now that Fry isn't the hero you thought he was in the Battle of Sheskler. Fry wasn't a hero, just another monster. A monster even more savage than the rest. So why? There was no place for someone like Selene by Frey's side. She wouldn't help him. She would just die for nothing. And if she got too close to him, her death would only become a burden he'd have to carry. Ghost understood what Fry was going through. That's why he tried to carry some of that weight himself. It's also why he wanted to drive Celine away. But no matter how much pressure he put on her, no matter the killing intent he radiated, Celine didn't yield. Instead, she smiled weakly at him. "I want to be a witness," she said. "A witness?" Ghost asked, confused. Lowering her head, she replied softly, "You must have felt it. You're the closest one to him. Fry Starlight, he's someone born different. The miracles he's achieved until now, they speak for themselves. Since the beginning of this war, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say Fry had carried everything on his own. I want to witness his journey, all the way to the end, just as he once looked at her. When she thought she'd die in a dark corner where no one could see, she now wanted to be there, watching his path through the chaos. But her words didn't sit well with Ghost. In a flash, he slammed her against the wall, punching the stone just beside her head. A witness? To the end? What nonsense is this coming from a coward who can't even meet my eyes? Did your luck up until now make you cocky? Celine wasn't a fighter. She was just an ordinary girl who had barely seen anything of the world. Her strength was average at best. Many soldiers stronger than her had already died. Even now, she kept trembling in front of Ghost, unable to meet his gaze. And yet, her smile never faded. Summoning what little courage she had left, she raised her head one last time to meet his eyes. "I won't die. Others might, but I'll stay by his side until the very end. Why? Because he showed it to me. He showed me what I could become one day. He showed me the future." Her voice was filled with conviction. Ghost frowned instinctively. "Huh? What kind of bullshit are you spouting now?" "He chose me," she repeated herself, her voice steady, reaffirming her resolve. Seeing the way she responded, Ghost couldn't help but wonder, maybe you're the craziest one out of them all. A sane girl, yet perhaps more unhinged than both Morval and Grimm. Ghost had hoped words would be enough to dissuade her, but Celine's conviction proved far stronger than he had anticipated. "Fine, whatever. If you're so eager to die, I won't stop you." Turning away from her, Ghost lost interest. Given her modest level of strength, her death in the upcoming battle felt inevitable to him. That was what Ghost firmly believed. But for Celine, the timid girl who once pissed herself from Frey's aura alone, those brief glimpses of the future he had shown her, visions of her standing beside him, had been enough to summon courage from within. That was the kind of resolve Celine possessed. And just like that, the squad finally disbanded after their heated meeting with Iris Sunlight. Speaking of the Sunlight Lord himself, he was currently soaring through the sky, his body ablaze with furious fire. He had just finished that exhausting discussion with the squad's mad survivors, and now, he was on his way to meet the one who troubled him the most, their even crazier leader. It only took him a few minutes to reach the mountain range where said leader had retreated. Iris descended like a meteor, violently crashing into the ground with blazing intensity. Just a few meters ahead stood Fry Starlight, who showed no sign of surprise, almost as if he had expected this visit for a while. "Fry Starlight, you truly love exhausting this old man?" Iris said, stroking his fiery beard. "I apologize for the chaos I caused," Fry replied with a smile. "Lately, I've been struggling to control my power. I had no choice but to retreat. Otherwise, I might have inflicted even more damage on the camp." A brief silence followed as they stared at each other. "Struggling to control your power, huh?" Iris muttered. "For a moment, I thought you were trying to escape, which would have forced me to waste time chasing after you." "Haha, don't be like that, Lord Iris." Fry laughed softly, his violet eyes narrowing. "You can come up with a better lie than that. After all, you alone wouldn't be enough to catch me. You insolent brat." Chapter 516. Scars Beneath the Halo 2. Iris chuckled, tugging his beard. Unfortunately for him, Fry wasn't wrong. Had Fry actually chosen to escape, it would have taken the combined force of all commanders to even try to bring him back. Iris still remembered the trial where he once defended Fry. Even back then, he knew that Abraham Starlight's son would eventually become the beast the Empire would depend on for its future wars. His prediction had come true. With terrifying accuracy, Frey's growth had far surpassed all expectations. A monster with incomprehensible abilities, and the Empire's deepest secret, his ability to break past the limits of talent itself. To be honest with you, Iris finally said, I came here because I don't want you to return to that cell. I'm listening, Fry replied, still wearing that unreadable expression, as if he had already anticipated the course of the conversation. At that moment, Iris was convinced the leader was far worse than his squad. I just finished meeting your team, those who survived your madness and suicidal charge. And? Fry asked, prompting him. They're all lunatics, Iris sighed. I don't know what kind of brainwashing spell you've cast on them, but they all want to fight by your side again. He gave Fry a meaningful smile before adding, all of them, except Uriel Platini. Upon hearing that, Fry instinctively narrowed his eyes. Uriel, the one who may hold the key to freeing him from his curse, no longer wished to stand by his side. I understand my squad's stance, Fry said. Now I'd like to know mine. What's going to happen to me? Dodging the subject of Uriel entirely, Fry pushed for the real reason behind Iris's visit. Obviously, you'll continue to fight in this war. You're a force too valuable to lose, but from now on you'll fight as a soldier, not a commander. You'll be assigned to another leader's unit and will be expected to follow their orders. Your squad members will join you, but only because they personally requested it. Sounds fair enough, doesn't it? Iris laughed, but Fry was puzzled by how lenient it all sounded. Stripping him of a meaningless title was the only punishment? Fine. As long as I'm on the front lines, I have no complaints. Good. Just don't go off charging alone again. Fry nodded, and together, they began their walk back toward the camp. Along the way, they continued to discuss the current state of things and what direction the war was likely to take next. So, Fry eventually asked, who's the commander I'm being assigned under? You'll find out soon enough once we arrive. Always the fan of surprises, aren't you? Aren't you good with surprises, Fry Starlight? Iris grinned slyly. As for Fry, his expression darkened slightly. My history with her is rather grim. All his life, every surprise he'd ever encountered had been either a near-death experience or the death of someone close to him. There had never been another outcome. No need for all that gloom, and don't belittle yourself, Fry Starlight. You are the main reason for our overwhelming victory thus far. The current kill ratio stood at 1 to 6, possibly 7, in the Empire's favor against the Ultras. Their side had gained a tremendous advantage, and it was all thanks to Frey's efforts. This is just the beginning. What we've achieved so far, it's only a single victory. Frey's point was clear. Even though he had slaughtered countless enemies and defeated many of their strongest warriors, he hadn't truly landed a major blow yet. Aside from Gvardiel, whose death was still uncertain, he hadn't claimed a single big fish. Even if it's only one victory, it will serve as our foundation. I'm grateful for what you've accomplished, Fry Starlight, but I hope you don't grow too used to blood and killing. Above all else, remember that you're human. Don't lose yourself. The advice made Fry smile involuntarily. A bitter smile. It was good advice. Truly, but Fry no longer had the luxury of following it. The path he walked was soaked in blood, and it would force him to kill again and again regardless of what he wanted. At the end of that path, Fry had no idea what he would become. I appreciate the advice, old man. I'd love to follow it. Once this war is over. The War of Shadows had only just begun, and both Fry and Iris knew that all too well. Their journey back to the camp was completely silent afterward, each of them drowning in their own thoughts. One was an old man burdened with the weight of tens of thousands of lives. The other, a young man whose shoulders carried enough pressure to crush the will of even the strongest men alive. That night passed without incident, and the next morning, The camp was alive with activity. Some soldiers were training rigorously. Others were catching up on sleep. Still others were huddled in groups, mapping out every possible detail and plan. Among them all, the future saint, Uriel Platini, had remained isolated inside her modest tent. She had placed a holy barrier around her space, keeping others from getting close, so no one dared disturb her. She sat quietly on a wooden chair beside her bed, getting dressed in silence. Her beautiful blue eyes, despite herself, kept flickering toward specific parts of her exposed skin. Scars. Ugly, painful scars, carved deep into her flesh, like the marks of a cursed dagger dipped in blood. They hurt her terribly, filled her with self-disgust, and brought with them an unbearable itch, like a never-ending rash from some cursed affliction. Uriel had grown used to the pain. She never spoke of it, never complained. She had long since accepted her fate. But even so, just for a fleeting moment, she let herself believe in miracles. Miracles that might rewrite fate itself. And that miracle had a name, Fry Starlight. She had hoped for more time, but it seemed that time had run out. Without warning, someone else stepped into her sacred barrier, as if it weren't even there. From outside the tent, a woman entered. A woman who understood her pain far too well. Saint Eurasia. "Milady." Uriel quickly pulled her clothes on and stood to greet her. Eurasia approached in silence, lifting a gentle hand to comb through Uriel's soft, golden hair. Her face was calm, composed, but little by little, her mask began to crack. The two of them looked so alike, so much so that strangers often mistook them for sisters. Between them, there was no need for secrets. That's why Eurasia finally broke down in her successor's arms. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, dear Uriel." She wept in Uriel's embrace. Gone was the quiet, revered saint the world knew. What stood there now was just a girl, crushed by the weight of it all. Eurasia was still young, not yet 30. She had always carried herself with a maturity far beyond her age. But not now. Not like this. "I'm sorry. I've reached my limit. I can't endure this anymore. I can't carry this curse any longer." She kept apologizing, again and again, to Uriel, who said nothing. She just stood there, frozen, trying to process it all. "I wanted to give you more time. I truly did. But Eurasia broke into sobs again. But Uriel stopped her. "It's all right, milady. I understand." With a pained smile, she said the words, "I'm grateful for all the time you gave me. It was far more than I ever deserved." Uriel said it to comfort Eurasia and herself, and in that moment she understood. The time had come. The saint must now face her destiny. Chapter 5:17. 10,000 Steps into Madness 1. Time moved fast. So fast one wouldn't notice until it was too late. It had already been a month since the war began. The Imperial camp had shrunk significantly as of late, with the main forces advancing deeper into enemy territory. One could say half the army had already moved, and it was only a matter of time before the rest followed. Among the units selected to return to the front lines, one stood out above the rest, Snow Lionheart's squad. He led his team forward, accompanied by a familiar face. A young man who seemed lost in thought most of the time. In war, vehicles were of little use. Their effectiveness was nearly negligible, and so most soldiers preferred to move on foot, especially considering how fast they were. That alone made the battles feel primitive, almost archaic, compared to the era they were living in. Every now and then, Snow would glance at the newest addition to his team, the one assigned to shadow and observe him. He waved a few times, right in front of the boy's face, but the lack of reaction only confirmed his suspicions. "Still lost in your own world, even though we're deep in enemy land? What's eating at you, Fry?" Snow's voice brought Fry Starlight back to reality. "Ah, sorry. I was thinking about last night." As the two ran side by side, Fry pointed ahead. "You mean the sudden withdrawal of the saints?" Fry nodded. "Yeah. Since you're the church's chosen hero, Don't you know the reason? Sorry, I don't, Snow replied with a bitter smile, his hand gripping firmly around Vermithor's hilt. I might be their chosen one, an important figure, sure, but my connection with the church is paper-thin. I barely know a thing about them. You could say Snow Lionheart was part of the church in name only. Saint Euratia, along with Uriel, had both withdrawn from the front lines, returning to the Empire under the pretense of urgent necessity. With pressure from the church, the commanders had no choice but to allow it, especially after the followers of the Lord of Light promised to dispatch their full forces in compensation. Fry still remembered the last words Uriel exchanged with him in front of the teleportation gate. She didn't say much, just apologized, told him she couldn't go on like this anymore, that her time had run out. For a moment, her retreat from the battlefield seemed like the right decision. It meant she would be safe on the other side of the world. But the look she gave him, and his inability to read her thoughts, left Fry wondering if retreat really was the right choice for her. Uriel had been one of the main heroines, the kind Fry had once written about. Each of them held buried potential, immense power just waiting to be unleashed. Uriel, in particular, had a lot, yet her strength had yet to awaken. Fry recalled the strange angel she summoned during their last battle. He couldn't help but wonder if that was the real reason behind her sudden withdrawal alongside Euratia. Is she going to pass on her title? A type of power, maybe? Fry thought, paying close attention to every piece of the puzzle. According to the engineer, Uriel was the key to dealing with the fourth shadow. That's why Fry had begun using the third-person perspective on her. If anything were to happen to her, he was ready to teleport to her side instantly. Since her affection points toward him were high, he could teleport to her exact location at any given time. For now, I'll monitor her quietly. It's still too early to leave the front lines, Fry thought calmly, laying out his plans. For now, this war takes priority. After the withdrawal of Saint Euratia, an SS+ rank hero, there was a gaping hole in Snow's team. Someone of comparable power had to be appointed, and the only candidate was Fry Starlight, though the commanders were still unaware of the full extent of his current strength. And he wasn't the only powerhouse in the squad. Sansa Valyrian was also among them. That alone made Snow's squad even stronger than it was before, even without Euratia. They weren't the only familiar names either. The team also included others from the elite class. Selena the Witch, a heroine much like Uriel, and another individual Fry had been keeping an especially close eye on, Dawn Polaris, the black-haired, red-eyed swordsman with an innocent face, who waved at Fry cheerfully the moment their eyes met. Dawn walked beside both Fry and Snow, appearing just as he had back during their days in the temple. Bearer of the last survivor ability, an ability no human should possess. Whatever the truth behind that ability was, Fry was certain of one thing. Something, some enormous being, was behind Dawn. But Dawn himself was unaware, and so there was no point in questioning him. Even if Fry tried to kill him, chances were he wouldn't succeed, since that ability would save him one way or another. To deal with a world-breaking ability, one had to possess a world-breaking power of their own. Fry had met that condition, but he still couldn't fully control shadow adaptation, which meant he wasn't ready to face bearers of such powers. Not yet. That's why he had no choice but to wait and observe, reacting accordingly. Uriel, the fourth shadow, Dawn, the demons, so much to worry about, so little he could do. I'll focus only on the enemy in front of me. The Ultras, they were the clearest obstacle. An obstacle his blade could reach, and those were the kinds Fry preferred. Fry drifted back into his thoughts once more, until a familiar voice echoed inside his mind. Fry, can I have a moment? The voice rang clearly within his head. In other words, telepathy. Sansa? Since when could you use telepathy? Fry asked, glancing back at the shadow behind him, the one darker than all the rest. I can use telepathy with someone I enter through their shadow. The ability manifested naturally once I mastered control over my power. Impressive. I really look forward to seeing just how far your strength will go, Fry replied, genuinely praising her. Sansa was both cursed and blessed. Her transformation into a demon had significantly boosted her power. The demonic body allowed her to wield the power of the seed freely, without restraint. It was an automatic power, granted by the transformation, not something Sansa had trained for or earned herself. Sansa went silent for a moment, reflecting on what Fry had said. To be honest, Fry, I don't think my power will grow any further. I've likely reached my limit. That was exactly what she had wanted to say. Fry hadn't expected her to say that, especially not now. I don't know much about the demonic path, but I do know that the true power of the Shadow King goes far beyond your current level. The training methods for humans and demons were vastly different. While humans advanced through meditation and spiritual cultivation, demons grew by consuming, devouring life itself. The greater a demon's hunger, the stronger it became. That's why Agarath, their king, was described as the monster who devoured everything. Sansa may be a demon now, but whether she could truly walk that path was uncertain. Her power was borrowed, not something she built with her own hands. And yet, the shadow of the king was no ordinary force. I know the Shadow King is a power beyond imagination, but I'm not it. I'm merely a copy. An imitation with limited potential. Chapter 518. 10,000 Steps into Madness. 2. At present, Sansa's strength rivaled that of a high-tier SS Plus rank fighter. And after mastering her ability, one could argue she had reached the peak of that tier. But now that she'd absorbed all the seed had to offer, there was nothing left to awaken. In other words, her path ended here. Stronger battles await us, against monsters far more powerful, like those of the upper seats who have begun to emerge. When that time comes, I won't be able to offer you much at my current level, Fry. Sansa was being completely honest, at least when it came to him. She had no one else to confide in about these fears. Ever since she sensed their enemies approaching for the first time, she knew just how terrifyingly powerful they were. And when the time came, Fry would be the one forced to face them alone. If he did, he would die. Sansa couldn't bear that thought. But the weak had no right to choose in the world they lived in. Fry understood her feelings perfectly. She had slammed against her limit. Just my opinion, Sansa, but I think you're underestimating yourself and what you're really capable of. You have a body far beyond human, a monstrous strength at your fingertips. That foundation alone puts your starting point light years ahead of people like me. While others had to claw their way up from the bottom, she had been catapulted straight to SS rank, all because of the seed. Even Fry, with all the absurd tools he had access to, had to climb rank by rank, enduring endless suffering. His current strength was the result of pushing himself through external means. His base was still S rank. But Sansa's foundation had started at SS. The truth is, you've just gotten used to things being easy. To surpass SS+, it's something most believe impossible. Breaking beyond that, that's on you. And what your hands will carve, not the seed. If Sansa wanted to grow stronger, there was only one path left. You'll have to live as a demon and walk the demonic path. Become a monster that feeds on life and kills to survive. A path not unlike Frey's path of blood. To be honest, I'm not sure I'm even qualified to be giving you this advice. I'm not a normal human either, and my power, it's just the result of the chaos inside this body. But in the end, their truth was the same. If they wanted overwhelming power, they had to become monsters worthy of it. Whether it was the path of blood, which turned one into a slaughterer drunk on carnage, or the demonic path, which forced its bearer to devour life and bring death wherever they went, they all led to the same end. Preparing for the battles ahead, both Fry and Sansa fell silent for the rest of the journey, each sinking into their own world. Far from Fry and his vanguard, who had borne the brunt of the war so far, there remained a portion of the army that had yet to engage in battle. Those stationed at the rear under the command of the elderly Iris Sunlight. In the previous campaign, Over half the troops had been deployed to the front lines, leaving around 20,000 men behind. They were designated as the support force, meant to intervene only in case of emergency. Far removed from the chaos at the front, their swords remained spotless, never once tainted with blood. Perhaps that was why they grew lax, lounging around the camp as if they weren't part of a war to begin with. At the edge of the camp, four middle-aged soldiers sat playing cards, wasting the hours in idleness. I wonder how long this war will last. I miss my kids and my wife. One of them sighed as he played his hand. Huh? Complaining already? Ha! We haven't even fought and you're ready to go home? Another laughed, pointing out the obvious, that they'd yet to bloody their hands. I get it, but we'll definitely win. The enemies suffered massive losses and been pushed back onto their own land. It's only a matter of time before the vanguard brings us good news. So what you're saying is you want to win this war without actually fighting in it? You're an optimist, man. Ha ha ha. Round after round, they played cards in a corner of the camp, utterly detached from the fact that they were soldiers, deep in enemy territory. But I have to admit, maybe it's naive, but it would be nice to win this war without having to stain our hands. It's fine. We've got heroes who'll win glory for us, like Fry Starlight. One of the soldiers scratched his nose, recalling that lone youth's feats. That monster won't stop until he's slaughtered every last ultra. I still get chills when I remember those mountains of corpses. To be honest, he scares me. The mention of Fry brought back grim memories, of hills of bodies, of lakes of blood. None of them had ever seen that much death in one place before. All right, enough with the bad vibes. Let's just be grateful he's on our side. You're right. Thank the gods. He's an ally. For a moment, they imagined it. The possibility of that monster being their enemy. The thought alone was so terrifying they quickly changed the subject, doing their best to forget him. The war was going well for the Empire, and hope began to creep into the soldiers' hearts. Hope that they might make it back home alive. The four soldiers continued their game until the sun dipped below the horizon and night began to fall. At that point, one of them stood up. "Where are you off to?" one of the others asked, prompting a groan from the man. "Where do you think? To take a piss?" He grumbled as he walked away from the group, heading toward a dead forest nearby. It was a field of rotting trees. Their trunks split and their bark faded to a lifeless gray. The place looked like it belonged in a horror film, but to the soldier it was simply a convenient spot to relieve himself. And that's exactly what he did, unbuttoning and unzipping his trousers. Ah! Finally, I feel alive again. He sighed with strange satisfaction, until he heard footsteps behind him. Still, he didn't stop what he was doing. Instead, he turned slightly, glancing over his right shoulder. "What? You need to piss too?" he joked, assuming it was one of his comrades. But he couldn't see the man's face at all. The stranger wore a mask that became the last thing the soldier ever saw, just before his head was severed from his shoulders. The masked figure didn't linger. He strode toward the camp, step by step, his eyes glowing crimson. Back then, the Imperial soldiers had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit them. Chapter 519, 10,000 Steps into Madness 3. The Ultras. Fanatics in their own right. A cursed order, bound to endless suffering. But just as the Empire had their heroes, so too did the Ultras. And perhaps the clearest example was that masked youth, the one in whom the common folk placed all their hopes. "You're running out of time, V," Gavid Linman had told him. "From now on, every failure will cost a life. I'll kill them myself, so go. Don't come back until you've become like him, a monster on Fry Starlight's level. This is your last chance, Viney Sparta." Linman's words, his threat, never left V's mind. That same young man now approached the main Imperial camp. Step by step, he passed through the outer barricades, encountering his first target. "Huh? Who the hell are?" the soldier began, but V cut him down in a flash. As the man's blood spilled across the ground, the rest of the soldiers began to realize. An intruder had slipped past their defenses, and they had never even noticed. A monster on the level of Fry Starlight. V muttered, his eyes glowing red. That's what you meant, isn't it, Lord Lindman? To infiltrate the enemy camp alone, to drown it in rivers of blood and pile the corpses into mountains. V was no tactician. He was far simpler than that. The young man had never known kindness. He never lived the life others his age were supposed to live. All he had done until now was survive and destroy. He escaped the rat trap and carved out a name for himself, but it wasn't enough. Now, as the soldiers of the Empire charged toward him, V drew the moonlight blade, his eyes flashing white, surrendering himself to madness. Berserker mode. Out of nothing, a jet-black armor wrapped around his body, while black flames erupted all around him. With a war cry that shook the skies, he surged forward, ripping through dozens of enemies in a single strike, his dark flames devouring everything in his path. The ground burned beneath him. Everything turned upside down as that berserk monster tore through the enemy camp alone. He didn't speak. He just screamed like a mad beast, like a predator unleashed for one purpose only, to kill. Many tried to stop him. All of them died. His destructive power was overwhelming. His sword was no ordinary weapon. And those black flames, they were hell itself. Flames that did not just burn flesh, but scorched the soul. Alarm sirens blared, and chaos spread under the wings of night. The signal was clear. A rabid beast had been unleashed among them. He leapt from place to place, crushing anyone in his way. Body parts scattered. Blood painted the earth. There was no pattern to his fighting, no technique, just raw slaughter. A maelstrom of chaos and fury that struck down anything that entered his range. Some attacks struck his body but left no mark. The strange armor shielded him from everything. The only sounds echoing across the camp were the brutal grinding of steel, his inhuman roars, and the dying screams of soldiers. Some fled. Others died trying to resist. It lasted only minutes, but for those less fortunate, for those forced to face him, those minutes felt eternal. His sword had not stopped once since the slaughter began. But now, for the first time, it was stopped. By another. A golden one. Out of nowhere, she appeared, completely blocking his path. Crimson hair flowed beneath her golden helmet. Her great sword blazed with radiance, brighter than ever. That sword. I see. So you're the one who attacked the temple that day. Before V stood the wielder of one of the legendary swords. Melina, bearer of the claymore. The one who once trained both Snow and Fry. She was never one for many words. And V, under the thrall of his berserk state, said nothing at all. The two clashed immediately, exchanging blows at terrifying speed. Each time their legendary swords collided, the ground beneath them shattered further. V fueled himself with black flames that surged to consume Melina's body, but she deflected them with her aura. You place far too much faith in your strength, boy, to dare storm our base alone like this. Gripping the claymore with both hands, she extended it, lengthening it until it exceeded 10 meters. Wielding it effortlessly, Melina unleashed a blindingly fast horizontal slash toward V. He tried to block, but the sheer force of it sent him flying, destroying everything in his path. Melina chased after him without pause, her body glowing with brilliant golden light. Thank your own foolishness for thinking your meager power would be enough to survive here. Boom! She slashed downward from above, aiming straight for V's head. He barely managed to raise his blade and block, but the weight of her blow drove his feet deep into the earth. It was surreal, how someone like Melina could control a sword that massive so perfectly. Shrink, Claymore. At her command, a strange phenomenon occurred. The gigantic sword vanished, and in its place, a golden dagger, no longer than 5 centimeters. Capitalizing on the shock, Melina landed directly in front of V, who was still holding his blade aloft, unable to keep up with her speed. Seeing the opening, she thrust the dagger at his chest. Extend, Claymore. Boom! On her command, like a merciless golden beam. The claymore extended at blinding speed, piercing through V's chest and launching him into the ground with tremendous force. It didn't stop. The sword continued growing, dragging V's body across the earth, grinding the land with his flesh. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the claymore vanished once more. V struggled to rise, a gaping wound now torn through his chest. Melina's technique was terrifying, and this was only the beginning. "Extend, claymore." He heard her voice clearly. And within less than a second, V saw the golden beam once again, piercing through his chest. The speed of the claymore's expansion bordered on insanity, practically instantaneous. Melina alternated between shrinking and extending her weapon with expert precision, displaying a duelist's mastery at the highest level. After being completely cornered by a single woman, V let out a primal scream from the depths of his soul, unleashing a blazing bomb of black flames. "You're holding a sword, so I assume you're a swordsman," Melina said calmly. Extending the claymore once more, she cleaved the fireball in two and walked through it with unshaken confidence. "But when I look at you closely, all I see is a beast craving death." Melina was a terrifying duelist. So much so that not a single Imperial soldier dared to interfere. They feared standing in her way. In response, V unleashed everything he had. A tidal wave of black flames surged from his body, an overwhelming flood of destruction directed solely at Melina. She readied herself to take the full brunt of it, but before she could even move, crimson flames descended from the heavens. Fierce, volcanic fire clashed against V's dark inferno, neutralizing it completely. The Ultras must really be underestimating us, sending this whelp alone, hoping he'd make a difference. Iris sunlight floated in the air, his body ablaze, eyes locked onto the monster he was tasked with hunting down. "Looks like they've run out of options, haven't they?" Chapter 520, 10,000 Steps into Madness. 4. With a savage roar, Iris threw a punch that materialized into a colossal flaming fist. It shot forth with terrifying speed, crashing into V and burying him deep into the ground. "Melina Maiden," Iris called out. "I'll deal with his flames. Don't hesitate. Kill him with your next strike." She gave a sharp nod. As soon as they exchanged glances, V burst out of the crater, targeting them both. Melina immediately closed the distance at sonic speed, clashing with him in a frenzy of sword strikes. Their blades moved so fast they left afterimages behind. V's body spewed black fire without pause, but Iris was there to intercept and contain it all. While V was distracted fighting Melina, Iris suddenly appeared on his right and delivered a blazing punch straight to his face. The blow sent V flying, only to be stopped cold by Melina, who slashed his chest with a swift stroke from her extending claymore. "He's tough," she muttered, the strange black armor dulling the blow's impact. "Then don't stop. Let's crush him with everything we've got." Like a red meteor, Iris dove in, unleashing a relentless flurry of strikes upon V. From the front and rear, V was completely surrounded. He tried to react, but a piercing sonic wave suddenly struck his ears, scattering his thoughts into disarray. The Empire's mages had begun chanting spells, while soldiers tightened the perimeter around the battlefield. There was no escape for V, caught between two SS rank monsters. His blood spilled, his bones shattered. V's mind went blank. At this rate, I'll fail. He would fail again, and this time he wouldn't be the only one to die. All the other rats would perish too. His mind raced, desperate to find a way to survive. Moonlight Blade couldn't save him. Melina had a legendary weapon of her own. His black fire was neutralized by Iris. Even the berserk state didn't give him the upper hand. His opponents were monsters. His armor held up, but it was slowly cracking. Their attacks were getting through. All his power felt utterly meaningless. At this rate, death was inevitable. Yet, for some reason, his mind didn't formulate a strategy. It wandered into old memories, fragments that never left him. There was a saying among the Ultras: one known by all who belonged to that brutal world. Heroes aren't born out of nothing in the Ultras. They are forged. They weren't chosen by some divine being. They weren't like the Empire's champions. In the Ultras, heroes were made from zero. From the rat pit, a rat would one day become a hero, and that was V. He had always been thrown into the pit, ever since he was a child. Thrown in with monsters of every kind, locked in until only one remained. And the one rat that survived was always V. Every time Gavid Linman came to inspect the pit, he'd find V, still breathing, surrounded by corpses. Why did V fight with such ferocity? Why did he always struggle to survive? Why didn't he just die and end his suffering? Because he has a reason. Sitting beside Murgo, Gavid raised a glass of wine, poured by the drunken old man himself. Lindman, did you send your dog to die? Murgo asked as they both looked up at the sky. Gavid smiled absent-mindedly. Maybe he really will die this time. Hearing that, Murgo laughed. Maybe? You really think he has a chance? He doesn't have a chance, but he has a reason to live. Everything that boy lives for is right here in my hands. Lindman stated with certainty. He doesn't have the right to die. Not yet. You seem to be placing a lot of hope in him, Murgo said, puzzled by Lindman's words. You don't know what that boy is capable of. V is the pinnacle of our kind. Of the Ultras, no one like him has emerged in 3 full centuries. It's easy for you to say that, considering you're his mentor. Murgo muttered, sighing, but Lindman chuckled. Mentor? What nonsense. I've never taught that boy anything. What? Murgo blinked in confusion, while Lindman smiled, eyes drifting toward the sky. He learned my style on his own. I simply let him see it once, and he mastered it. That's the kind of monster he is. One who will either die today or awaken and show this world a new kind of horror. In this world, nothing mattered but strength. There was no place for the weak, no place for cowards, no place for those who refused to fight. Now, trapped between 2 monsters, V felt death crawling toward him. His head was on fire. No matter what he did, he couldn't turn the tide. Iris and Melina were tearing him apart mercilessly. Why? Bleeding profusely beneath his broken armor, V staggered as the thought echoed in his mind. Why can't I defeat them? I made a pact with one of the strongest demons. I trained, survived monsters of every kind. They called me the greatest hero in the history of the Ultras, and yet I still lose. I keep failing. I'm gonna fail again, and if I fail, everyone else dies. All the other weaker rats. Every one of them would die. Everyone had placed their hopes on him. You're the hero, V. You're our best. You're the strongest. We're counting on you. Heavy. It was all so heavy. Every single burden thrown onto his back. Do this. Do that. Everything he had done until now was fulfilling someone else's desires. And now he was dying doing just that. Why? All that strength he'd built was meaningless. Why? V screamed, unleashing everything he had. But despite his desperate struggle, his enemies completely overwhelmed him. In the end, he simply wasn't that kind of monster. As his final moments neared, V trembled, remembering a feeling he hadn't felt in a very long time. Fear. I'm going to die. And so will the others because of me. We're all going to die. With trembling limbs, shattered armor, and eyes crying blood. V could barely stand against the merciless onslaught of his foes. With chattering teeth and a terror that gripped his soul, V wept. We're going to die. 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 I'm going to die. Not because it was his choice, but because it was theirs. His strength wasn't enough. I'm not that kind of monster. In his final moments, he realized how weak he truly was. Melina's claymore was a breath away from severing his neck. Iris's fist, a heartbeat from piercing his chest. And in that final moment, V remembered only one thing. Amid all the fear and dread of death, A single sentence resurfaced in his mind. Go. And don't come back until you've become a monster on par with Fry Starlight. That's what Linman had told him. Words that echoed in V's ears over and over again. Ah, I get it now. With lifeless eyes, no one could tell what he was seeing. V gripped his sword tighter. All I have to do is become Fry Starlight. Then everything would be all right. If he were Fry, neither of those two would have ever trapped him. That kind of strength, that's what he needed. He finally understood. And in that moment, V vanished. Between Iris and Melina, he completely disappeared without a trace. Neither of them even understood how he moved. Far off in the battlefield, he reappeared. His hand reaching down to pick up a second sword from the ground. A completely ordinary sword, now held in his left hand. His moonlight sword, in his right. He hadn't done anything, just picked up another blade. But somehow, his aura changed completely. To veterans like Iris and Melina, who were finely attuned to such shifts. His gait, his expression, his presence, everything's different. What just happened? Even his very presence had changed. It wasn't something that should have been possible. That stance. They had seen it before, both of them. But neither wanted to believe it. And then V moved. 10,000 steps of shadow, supreme art. Eternal blackout. With a single motion of his blades, everything around him was severed. Thousands of dark slashes erupted from his body, consuming the battlefield in a merciless wave of destruction. Melina and Iris immediately fell back, their faces frozen in shock. But V had already appeared between them. That speed. 10,000 steps of shadow, eternal darkness. Boom! With a deafening explosion, V unleashed a flurry of lightning-fast strikes that overwhelmed his enemies completely. His blades became heavier, faster, his style transformed, his entire form of combat. It all shifted. He had become something else entirely. Fry Starlight. He had always been their ally. That's why they never truly considered it. But how terrifying, to imagine Fry as the enemy. Crush him. Use everything you've got. Iris roared, launching forward with all his might, followed by Melina in perfect sync. Both lunged to end V before he escalated any further. But they froze. They froze the moment they saw the stance he assumed, augmenting his depleted aura with black flames drawn from his demonic pact. V prepared to unleash the one attack that would make them regret stepping anywhere near him. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Evade it! Now! Iris shouted. But it was already too late. Nameless judgment. In that moment, everything went dark. The gates of hell flung open, and a roaring torrent of black fire swallowed everything in its path. The attack didn't just consume Iris and Melina. It kept going, ripping through ranks of the Imperial Army like a tidal wave of damnation. Calamity, a massacre that turned the battlefield into a living inferno. In less than a second, thousands were incinerated, mercilessly erased, and there, within the storm of black fire, death, and ruin, walked a single youth wielding twin blades. The sword he had borrowed had shattered under the force of the blow, so V replaced it. His right hand still held the moonlight sword, and in his left, he now gripped a golden claymore, taken from Melina's corpse. There, in the heart of that cursed inferno, the most terrifying monster among the Ultras had awakened his true potential.